Please work.
It's been in color again recently. It's been in color again recently.
Is it? Oh, there we go.
All right, we'd like to welcome everyone to our Planning Commission meeting. We'd like to get started. Let's go ahead and get started with a Pledge of Allegiance. If you please stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move into the next item on the agenda, which is a prayer or thought, and I actually have that for this time. I thought about a lot of stuff to talk about. One of the things, so I'm going to bring back a theme that I did. I think the last time I did this was about a year ago, and that's essentially digging into the archives. I decided to keep it a little bit short because we do have a pretty good sized agenda. I think we've got some stuff to talk about today. But this is the Davis County Clipper from November 17th, 1950. And there's an interesting little article over here in the corner that says, the first meeting of the newly organized Centerville Planning Commission will be held Friday at 8 p.m. R. Clay Allred, County Planning Director, will meet with the group and acquaint members of the board with their duties as provided by law in order that they may proceed with the planning of future growth of the city. Corey, do we have minutes of that meeting?
Probably. I haven't read them, but probably.
Yeah. Anyway, so just a little history of the Centerville Planning Commission. It looks like it started in November of 1950. I don't know what was discussed. There's not any follow-up article on that, but so nothing super deep, but it is kind of interesting to me, some of the stuff that has gone on in the past, and it's interesting that we've been meeting as a planning commission now for, 68 years, I guess, almost, right? So, and then I will offer a short prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity we have to gather together as citizens and to discuss the issues that come before the community. We thank Thee that we are able to discuss freely and openly, and that we can have a civil and organized discussion. We ask Thee to bless that we can continue to keep those needs of the community in our minds, and that we can work together to find the best solutions and the opportunities that we have to help and to serve. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. All right. Let's go ahead and get started then with the first item of business on the agenda. We have, it's been scheduled for a public hearing. This is for a conditional use permit for an accessory building. We're going to consider the proposed conditional use permit for increased height for an accessory building to a residential home and agricultural zone at 1771 North, 125 East, and we'll turn the time over to staff.
All right, thank you, Commission. So this is an accessory building for Mr. Fred Hale, our frequent flyer member of the Planning Commission. And he would like to build a detached garage that just barely exceeds the maximum height for an accessory building in an agricultural low zone. So the maximum height for a detached garage is 20 feet, and based on the average calculations of this building, it comes to about 23. So we measured the height based on the average between the peak and the eave of the roof. But as you can see, based on the grade changes on the property and kind of a few different pitches, there were many averages to calculate. So I had the architect put them on the plans for you, so you can kind of see it's many different averages of many elevations all combined and then averaged again. So it does come to around 23 feet. So he's allowed to do this with a conditional use permit on this property, but with every additional foot in height, it has to be an additional foot in setback from the property line. So for setbacks for accessory buildings and agricultural zones, the setback is 5 feet from the back and side property lines. As you can see in this table and on the site plan, he well exceeds the 8-foot setback that it would need to be based on the increase in height. So the least setback is 22 feet right here, and then I think 45 and 39 from the west side there. So this garage does access through this alley, which is being built right now in Rigby Court. So it's not gonna have any frontage like from the street. So all the trailers and everything will go through this back alley. The garage doors faced west. And then I know in some other cases around the city, people have been nervous about garages being too close to other people's homes, that there's like a visual, like people can see into other homes. The only second story window is this one that faces north. So that one is not too significant. None of the other windows are too high, so they can't be peering into the other neighbors' homes. And because of those distances, I don't think that it will be too much of a privacy issue based on 20 to 40 feet between the property lines. So it goes through the same conditions as any other conditional use permit to mitigate any impacts in the surrounding area. So these homes on these lots to the south haven't been built yet, and Mr. Hill is currently building his home here. So there aren't any neighbors to the south yet, but behind and to the west. And they are all pretty spread out, and any neighbors that move in will know that the garage is there because they will be building their home next to it. So we don't see any immediate impacts on privacy or to the surrounding area. There were a few other concerns just in terms of the property lot. Mr. Hale has come in for a text amendment for the impervious surface area, and he does currently meet the 40% that's required. There is a detention basin right behind the garage, as you can see here. So any other stormwater beyond 40% would be retained on his property. Because of the size of the garage, we were also concerned about the accessory dwelling unit issue. As you guys know, those aren't allowed here. So we were just wanted to make sure that he wouldn't be using it for an accessory dwelling unit or a guest house. It doesn't technically meet the definition of a dwelling because it doesn't have a full kitchen, but just to keep that in mind so we don't have any enforcement issues down the line that he can't use it as a guest house or rent it out to anyone else in the future. You guys have any questions?
Questions for staff? I do have one question, I guess, along that final point, or that final point there about not using it as an accessory dwelling. In the suggested motion, that's item number 3, shall not be used as an accessory dwelling unit or guest house. I guess that means that if we put that in as a condition, that's forever. Even if the city were to change the standing on accessory dwelling units, then he'd have to come back and amend the conditional use in order to allow that? Is that how that would work?
Well, putting on Lisa Romney's hat as an attorney,
Yeah,
which I'm not.
Sorry.
As written, yes, it would prohibit that, and he would have to come back and amend his conditional use permit if the city were to allow it. The other language I would presume that you could legally put in, or unless otherwise approved by the city, so that way it opens up the door that if accessory dwellings somehow ever get adopted, then it would go through that process unless otherwise provided by the city. So I think it's your choice on whether you want to open that door as a possibility, or because it's a closed door right now, he would, the ultimate solution would come back and amend the conditional use permit if it's allowed.
And so just to be clear, an accessory dwelling unit is any place where somebody lives. I think in the staff report it talks about a full kitchen or something. Is that the?
Yeah, the definition says any living, sleeping, and kitchen facilities. And then it's very specific on its kitchen facilities. It exempts hot plates and microwaves and things. So this would be somebody coming in with a range. Mm-hmm. The range is usually the trigger. Mm-hmm. And we do have places where you have a single-family home that will have a kitchen upstairs normally wants to put a kitchen in downstairs. That downstairs could fall under the definition of accessory dwelling. So what we do in that case is in our zoning ordinance, it says in a single-family home, you can have a second kitchen if you record a document along with that second kitchen, indicating to the future purchaser that that is a kitchen as a single-family home, not a accessory dwelling unit. So we do allow second kitchens under certain circumstances, but it is recorded against the property on a permanent basis.
Okay. Thanks, Corey.
If we took out condition 3, couldn't he still just be required to follow our city ordinance that doesn't allow accessory dwelling units?
Yes, the controversy is of enforcement. Trying to be delicate, somebody can make changes later, and until you can prove that their situation exists, it gives enforcement ability and evidentiary ability that works against you. If you have it in a permit that's some type approved that shows that this was built this fashion with this condition in place, it's an easier target to hit to say you were approved this way because you sought that approval versus something else came along and we're trying to say, is it not? Did you understand that? Did you not understand it? So this becomes a clear and concise way of saying, here's the approval parameters given that snapshot in time.
Okay.
Because we do get calls about accessory dwellings in desire as well as ones that exist. And the ones that exist, we have to take the position that there was never a time that they were allowed, so they are not approved by the city. But the city has chosen a life safety or complaint process to pursue enforcement. So then if enforcement comes in and a complaint says, I think somebody has another kitchen in there, you can imagine what it's like to try to get an idea if there's another kitchen in there, because certainly knocking on the door is not a likelihood that I'm going to be invited in as an enforcement officer to investigate.
Yeah.
So now it becomes, what are the circumstantial evidence to prove that's the case?
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Great. We would, at this time, like to invite the applicant, if you'd like to come up and speak to any of these points, or? Great. Thank you. All right. This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, and at this time, we would invite any members of the public who would like to come up and speak to do so. All right. Seeing nobody coming forward, we'll close the public hearing. It's your last chance, if you'd like. Just kidding.
If you have any questions,
all right, if anybody has any questions for the applicant or staff, otherwise, I will entertain a motion if we don't have any other discussion.
I hereby make a motion to approve the conditional use permit for the accessory building detached garage at 1771 North, 125 East with conditions 1, 2, 4, and 5 in the staff report with findings 1 through 5.
Second. Second.
Okay, we have a motion. One minor thing, under finding number 3, the extra necessary setbacks, it says necessary. I don't know if that matters or not, but maybe when we get to the final stuff,
Necessary.
make
Yeah.
sure it says necessary.
There you go. I personally think, I understand why the condition 3 is there, but I feel like it's unnecessary given what's happening in the city right now. We can go back to the date for when this was approved, and the date says we don't have any accessory dwelling units. It feels like if that were to change in the future, keeping that condition on would create a headache for him if he wanted to change that. And I think it feels pretty plain that right now we don't allow ADUs. And so that's, I think, a double condition that doesn't need to be there. That was my only debate or information I'd like to say.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, based on probably this discussion alone, but I'm sure the applicant is already aware that ADUs are not permitted, and so, you know, I feel like that's part of the reason why I brought up the point in the beginning, was to make sure that we're not creating extra heartache down the road
Yeah.
if something were to change.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But I think he likes coming here, right?
Yeah, that's the only reason I'd oppose it, is we need another excuse to get Fred back.
He needs
so.
to come back. He
Right.
doesn't see us enough.
I'm sure. Any other discussion? Great. Then on the motion to approve the conditional use permit, we will start with a vote with Commissioner Hinsey.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, that motion passes. All right, we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is also been scheduled for a public hearing. This is to consider the proposed home occupation conditional use permit for Epic Party Events LLC, a gaming trailer that will be located at 1092 North Doris Street. We'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you. Let me just pull up the map real quick. All right, so this is a home occupation that is a new kind of business that I'm learning about, which is a gaming trailer. So it's a kind of like a recreational vehicle that you allow kids into the trailer, and it's set up with a bunch of video games, and it can be used for parties and events and things around where the kids rent it out and all play together. So the applicant, Mr. Kirby Barker, would just like to store the trailer on his property, so he wouldn't be hosting any events in or on his property at all, but just storing his trailer. As you can kind of see from this map, there are 2 driveways. So he lives on this corner lot, and this north driveway from Powell Avenue is what the home was built with. And then he has recently built a driveway on Doris Street, which is also 500 East. The problem with this second driveway is that it was not approved by the city, so it's not built to city standard, and it has an over 20% slope, and I do believe I attached some photos. Here we go. Nope, okay.
That was before.
That was before. And then there are some photos attached in the packet that show the driveway as it is now. But it never got approval from the Public Works Director, so it is not built to our city standard and is not an approved access. So the applicant would either have to eliminate one of those photos, would eliminate this driveway that's coming from Doris Street, or rebuild it to the city standard, so it would be an approved use. So that kind of limits the options in terms of the storage of the trailer. So right now, the only approved storage place for the property would be from the driveway coming from the north on Powell Avenue and go behind the house. One of our city codes is that you can't store recreational vehicles within your front yard for more than 7 days. So for a corner lot, that means your front yard and then also your street side yard, which is the first 20 feet from the street to your house. So this is the driveway as it is now. And that is probably the driveway he would like to use, but he would have to just kind of rebuild it to our city specs and standards in order to store the trailer there and use it as he would like. So right now, the only approved use would be from Powell behind the house in that other picture that was shown. Because it does have to be beyond that 25-foot and the 20-yard setback from the street. So going through the development standards for home occupations, this is obviously not on the permitted use for home occupations, so it has to go through the CUP process. So if you have any questions on those first development standards, I'd be happy to answer them, but I'll kind of skip to number 8. The trailer will have a vinyl siding that advertises the business on the side of it. And this isn't a product, so to speak, but it is the business itself. So I do think it adds kind of a commercial, definitely a commercial visual presence in a residential area. You won't, depending on which driveway they end up parking in, you probably won't be able to see the sides of it. But I think screening is a point of discussion for you guys. Depending on which driveway the applicant chooses to do, it could be very visible or not visible at all. And I know that some citizens have contacted me about the visual presence of the trailer, and also parking issues. So our municipal code does not allow on-street parking for over 48 hours and has that no parking in the front yard zoning code. So even though that those are already in place, it may be necessary to put on further conditions for the parking of the trailer, to not be in the street, or to not be in the front yards, or to add even further screening than just the house itself. Because right now it would just be the house that would be kind of the screening element. And depending on how it would park, the commercial aspect could be visible if they do decide to use that Doris Street driveway. So I think those are all important items to be discussed based on what we can see from the public right-of-way and what other citizens have contacted me about. They are worried about the screening element and the visual presence and just the overall parking of a rather large trailer in their neighborhood. I think those are the large issues on the site, particularly. This extra driveway that they paved without our permission also added significantly to their impervious surface. They're right on the cusp of the maximum impervious surface for the lot, which is 60%. So they can't really pour any more concrete at this point in order to meet our code for impervious surface. So they would have to take some away if they wanted to pour some further in the back of the house. But because the business is not operating on the site, we didn't see any glaring impacts on the surrounding area and the residential character of the neighborhood because it is just storage of this trailer. Any questions?
Can you just touch on again the front driveway, why it can't be on the front driveway?
Under our recreational vehicle parking, we have front yard setbacks.
Okay.
So in this case, there's two of them. There's a side front and a front for definition purposes. And what it says in the RV parking, so this is going for anybody who has a boat, anybody who has a trailer, it cannot be parked in that front yard area, even if it's in a driveway, for more than 7 consecutive days. That gets a dicey enforcement because, 7 consecutive days, so I take it out, put it in the car wash, bring it back. Does that count? Does that discount? So,
Does it, Corey? Yeah.
yeah. Does the tongue sticking out in front of the house, is that 7 consecutive days? We have a lot of those kind of problems with enforcement. But, the idea is that you can prep your trailer, get it ready, do the necessary things. But when you're putting it into the long-term storage, the idea is it's to be in the side or rear yard of the home on a storage basis is the intent of the 7-day. And so that's just by code prohibited that way. So when we're looking at this as an event trailer, it looks like that depending on what their decision is and if there's screening required, they would have area to be able to park it like a normal RV. The issue of screening and on-street parking have been some of the comments that we've received.
So Corey, along those lines then, just to be clear, it says the trailer must be parked beyond the 25-foot front yard setback and the 20-foot, is that supposed to say side yard setback completely?
Street side yard.
Street side yard.
Yeah.
So does that mean, I don't know how far, I'm guessing the house is 25 feet back from the street on the front and?
Yeah, you can, just turn this. Yeah, that's right.
So that's Powell on top, right? Powell Avenue on top?
Yeah, so this is Powell, this is Doris. So this is the approved driveway access.
Mm-hmm. So it's What is that telling me there? 40 by 22?
So it's 32 by 22, so it's 22. And this is the unapproved access.
So if they were to put that trailer on that east side of the house and get the front of the trailer back behind the front of the house, then that would...
Yeah, so this is the backyard. So if the approved would be behind the house on the northeast side.
And that would meet the 37 feet. He's looking like she's showing
Yeah.
22 feet wide, 37 feet long, and that could still be parked in that area in the RV parking pad site.
Okay.
But they're not asking for that. Or are they?
Well, they have two driveways, and we're not recognizing the other driveway off the street because it did not receive access permit through the city's park strip and onto the street. And there's some damages occurring because once you reach the property line, you see a crest or a hill, a slope of a hill, and that's a 20% grade, and driveways are limited to 12% grade. And so that's what's some of the cost. So it's an unapproved driveway right now. They may want to use that, but it's an unapproved driveway. It's not built in the proper configuration. So if they want to use that driveway, they would need to reconstruct the driveway and get the road encroachment permit. Because we can already see that there's some damage to the road surface because of coming off of that steep slope.
And then on that east side, it's not currently paved. That's what that one picture shows, right? And they would not be allowed to pave it because then
Because
they
of the
exceed
other
the
driveway.
impervious surface.
Yeah, I didn't get,
There is some pavement, yeah, and
Oh, so-
some gravel. Yeah, this is all included.
So that included in the impervious?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, so the picture that's on there doesn't
It's
show any
not,
paving, does
yeah.
it? Is that paved since?
The gravel does count.
Oh, great, gravel counts as impervious?
Yeah.
yes, under the storm drainage ordinance, the Public Works Director says even though gravel can soak through, it's still counted in the overall because one, it could be eventually paved, two, the mud tracking that goes out onto the road. And it's not just grass, it's being used for the travelway. And so that's calculated as part of the storm drain calculations and fees on the property. So he counts it as impervious surface.
Okay, so if they were to throw some cement there, then that wouldn't actually change the calculation
it's
because we've already
Cassie.
calculated
Yeah,
it that way.
that was already included in the impervious calculation.
All right, thanks, that's good,
And-
good
and-
clarification.
And that east side then is permitted. I mean, that meets code.
Yeah.
It's off the street. It's
Mm-hmm.
for both, from both sides, because it's a corner.
Yeah, the issue will be is, do you think screening is pertinent? And then the issue of on-street parking.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Great. Then we'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and speak if you'd like.
Yeah,
Come up to the microphone if you would. Yeah, that's great.
so I have a cold, so. be a
Introduce
little-
yourself if you would.
Yeah. The only thing I'd like to speak on is the damage on I guess the south side that is there from the driveway was actually the contractor we hired. His tractors did that damage, not our cars. So that's just one note, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those too.
Yeah, I think one of the main questions there is the question of screening. If you're to put the trailer on, for example, the east side of the house and back it in there, and then put a gate in front of it or something, how'd you feel about that?
Yeah, well, she kind of mentioned it would probably be really hard to see the trailer sides from there because the garage is right next to it, and then we have a retaining wall and a white fence from our neighbor on the other side that will go up about as high as the trailer is.
Does the display, does that wrap around to the front of the trailer or not?
It does, but it's mostly covered by a generator that sits on the tongue in the front that's covered with a diamond plate box. So, I mean, you could see the name, so if we need to put some kind of cover on that, we could. I mean, but it would only be the front that would be truly visible from the road in any way.
Well, but the neighbor would have to see the side as well.
Yeah, the neighbor.
The neighbor to the east?
That's where it would be.
Yeah, that white fence there.
Yeah. Do you have a cover for it?
No, I mean, it's a pretty big trailer, but I guess we could put, like, tie tarps down on it or something if we had to. And I don't know if it was mentioned, we don't plan on storing it up there in the winter because it's a pretty steep hill and I don't want to mess around with that in the snow, so. Oh, and there was a point people were bringing up the on-street parking. We don't actually own the property, my grandfather does. And he builds trailers and he parks the trailers in the front or has me do it as part of my job. So that's not my business. It's not related to me in that fashion, so.
Okay, just so I understand the picture, to the left of the garage, and there's a white fence, the neighbor's, is that the east portion, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is facing south right
Looks
now.
like where that trampoline is sitting.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
And did you say in the staff report, it said you expect your trailer to be 11 feet high, is that right?
Yeah, it's 11 feet high total, yeah.
So looking at that basketball hoop, if I know my basketball heights, because I can dunk
We're
it.
taking it down, actually. We're not
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
do
No, I
that.
meant just to judge the height.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about. So it looks like it would be about the height there. So the fence might leave, looks like a foot and change or 2 feet and change above the retaining wall. Just pointing that out.
So where does 11 go to? The bottom, the rim?
The rim?
The rim would be 10 feet, right?
10 feet, right.
So, unless Logan's dunking it, then it's 8 feet.
Yeah.
Adjustable.
Okay. So yeah, there's going to be above that.
Any other questions for the applicant? Anything else? Great, thank you.
Did you get his name, Katie? Did you get his name?
Kirby,
Okay.
got it. Okay, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, and so at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public to come forward and speak if they'd like.
I live directly across the street from that.
Can you say
Could you
your
give us
name?
your name, please?
Sorry, it's Cheryl Hardy.
Cheryl Hardy, thank
Yeah,
you.
I live at 535 Powell, which would be directly across the street, right there. My neighbor just to the west of us and myself, we have concerns of just seeing that sitting there. It's big. I didn't realize it was that tall. I was thinking more of like a little cargo utility trailer, so that even kind of even changed the dynamics. I don't know how long it is. Wrapping it would be good, where we wouldn't have to see that. That's a big trailer, really big. And even to try and make that turn to get back there, and they have another trailer that they keep there as well. And like he was saying, he's planning on moving that, but there's, still a lot of other debris. And one of the photographs that you brought up, did show that. My concern, and it's not this one, it was another one with a trailer
Yeah, go to the
and
one
some
that you took
barrels and
pictures
stuff.
that shows current. Yeah. Not that one. This one.
That's what we see. And to add a big trailer, which I wish Kirby the best. I'd like to see him, do well with this, but to add that into the equation at 11 feet tall, his graphics are beautiful, but it's definitely something that, the neighbors here would see right down into that is adjacent to their driveway and their backyard. I see it across the street. I mean, I don't see it like my other neighbors do, but it will still be right there. And I'm not opposed to it going there if it can be pushed back further and maybe covered, or maybe a solid fencing put around it. But 11 feet's pretty tall. That'd be a really hard piece of equipment to cover up. So I didn't realize it was that big. That will go above the roof line or to the very peak of that. Is that not that high? So those are my concerns.
Thank you.
As well as and Kay and her son David also said be sure and mention my name as well, that he's ill and she's trying to take care of him, and they wanted to be here as well. But that's kind of our position on that. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak?
If nobody from the public, we have some written comments to submit for the public hearing.
Okay. we will,
If there's an extra, I can grab it from the recording.
Share.
oh, that's another one of that one.
Will you just read them? Do you want to just read them for us? Or should we just read
You
them?
can just read them,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't, like, read them aloud is what I mean for,
Well, it's entirely what you want to do, but no, they're given to each one of you. You can read them. If you want to summarize or somebody wants to, that's fine too, but they're entered for the record.
Yeah, so we'd just like to make note of the receipt of these written comments for the record. One of them is from Cheryl Hardy, and the other one is from David Olson. So,
I just got the emails this morning, and they do just basically express the concerns over screening and the storage of the trailer to make sure it's not parked on the street and to make sure it's well screened from the property. So those are the main concerns that I was gathering from the email. Between the CUP and the zoning code that just doesn't allow on-street parking for over 48 hours, hopefully. We can add some conditions that would ensure that all the neighbors surrounding them are happy.
great.
Well, something that was asked here in public comment, in addition to number 2 from David Olson, was the size of it. And looks like in the staff report, it's indicated to be approximately 35 feet long by 11 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
And what would that be, 8 foot wide or 7 foot wide, or however wide you can drive down a lane
Is
of
that
traffic?
12 probably?
Yeah.
12?
I believe, wait, I think I included it there, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's like 8.6.
Oh.
8.6, that sounds about right. Anyway, so, yeah, that looks like that was a question that maybe was up for debate. And Corey, in regards to that, do you know does our ordinance talk about width of RVs that are allowed? Is there a maximum RV width, a recreational vehicle size? I looked at the definition, but didn't see anything.
No, I mean, that was our struggle at the staff level is that you could have a diesel pusher. I mean, there'd be, if everything was right, a diesel pusher could be parked in a side yard. So the size for us was not as large of an issue to create an impact that's different than could happen in a residential neighborhood. So,
Sure.
so we don't address the size of RVs in our ordinances, but we did acknowledge that it is a commercial use vehicle, and there should be some sensitivity that is at least visually something different. So we brought up the issue of screening at least off the street.
Visually meaning the branding on the side might
branding
be
on the side.
different than a personal vehicle.
Corey, would you, oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on, real quickly. Let's, one more chance for anybody else from the public who'd like to come forward and speak. One second. Seeing nobody else coming forward, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and we'd invite the applicant to come up and respond to any of the concerns that have been raised.
So the yard there is a mess. We're actually putting the gravel down currently. So that's a lot of the mess there. We're clearing out bush, and we had a tree that we cut down that saplings are coming up. So this dump trailer is full of that kind of debris as well that we'll be emptying out as soon as we're done. And then these barrels here, I didn't put there, but we'll be glad to move them. We didn't know that people were concerned about that. So I just wanted to address that the debris is purposeful because we're working on preparing the yard, and so that was the only thing.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for applicant or staff?
Well, I guess I have a question for staff. The trailer has to be back behind, can it be parallel with the front of the house, or does it have to be so many feet behind the front of the house? Or can it be right up to the front of the house?
It can be right up to the setback line. So sometimes,
So what is the setback line?
so they're looking at, I'm not sure what their measurements here. Do you remember the distances measured?
It might be 22.
Yeah, so it's 22 to the home. Is that right? Is that what you're saying here?
That's what this
22 to the home, so the 20, that would be a side street because it doesn't qualify for the 25. And so the setback would be the first 20 feet, you can't have the trailer there. So in this case, you could potentially have it 2 feet
2 feet
in front of the house.
Okay, so because I heard, could it be further back, but it really doesn't have to be.
Correct.
It could be,
It could be right to that line. Again, it comes back down to if there's a screening element, and if that's a concern,
yeah.
you know, if it is protruding out in front of the house, even though it meets the setback, you still have the visual issue,
Okay.
where if it was set back further, you could eliminate some of that concern.
And if it were set back further, it looks like there's a grade that possibly it would be below the level of the fence if it was back far enough.
Yeah, it looks like there's a sloping grade back there.
All right, okay.
I'm concerned about that grade because, I mean, when you look at the other picture that shows from the other way, not that one, but the other one.
I don't know which one I
Yeah,
had
there
on.
was one picture in the packet that,
The one that shows from the rear of the house looking
toward the
north.
front.
It shows, it's
Mine's in
1574.
mine's in black and white, but it's that one.
It shows from where the basketball hoop is.
There you go.
There's,
Yeah, that's the
I
one.
mean, it might just be wood chips, but it's a significant amount of grading issues that I feel like the trailer would have a really even many more feet high appearance due to that grading, actually. So that's a little bit concerning there.
Well, yeah, would you come up to the microphone, please?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything from the house back is pretty flat. So the grade is only entering or coming down into that driveway.
So right there underneath that basketball
That's a
hoop,
big
is
grade.
that,
That's just wood chips right there. And those we're putting those out currently.
that was from the tree that was taken out?
Yeah, and we are distributing that through our planters and stuff right now. So that will all be gone.
Okay.
but the backyard doesn't slope down, it's pretty,
It's pretty level. I mean, it might slope a little, but it's not bad.
Gotcha. So, Corey, one more question, and then I have a comment. Just to be clear, the setback, the 25-foot setback, does or does not include the tongue, or that's a question mark?
The black and white is any part of the recreational vehicle.
Okay.
So I would say even
So the tongue's
hitch
got to
clip.
be, yeah, 25 feet.
got to be back behind that setback, either the 20-foot setback or the 25. This case, we're talking about the 20 right now.
Okay. So one comment that I have, with this one is, you know, if you put the trailer right in there, if this were a fifth wheel or something like that, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, and that would be a permitted use of that side of the thing, and fifth wheels get very tall, very tall. And then along those lines, you know, we recently had a lot of discussions about fences and fence heights and whatever else, and in order to cover that whole thing, I don't know that we would be prepared to go and say, you need a 11 or 12-foot fence. That seems pretty excessive. So even if you put a 6-foot fence in there, the trailer's going to stick above it, but it wouldn't be any different than if it said, I don't know, Winnebago or whatever. I don't think they make fifth wheels, but you know what I mean.
It would be very different, Winnebago versus Epic Party Game commercial.
Well, what if Epic Party Games made fifth wheels? It's just a big sign. That's all I mean, it's just a big kind of logo.
I mean, it's a nice logo, but it is different. It is very different than that is different than.
Well, that's not the whole thing that you're going to see.
I think it looks very commercial, very much commercial. I'm saying to equate this look, commercial look, with just a regular, I agree in size, yes, and in height, yes, but as far as actual just the wrapping, it's going to be very different than just a regular
But
one.
again, in order to cover that whole thing, you'd have to put like a 12-foot fence there,
Right, right.
which
It's not allowed.
I don't think that's an appropriate approach. So, in my opinion, and obviously we can have this discussion if we want, I don't see that as necessarily being an issue as long as the trailer is parked far enough back and not on the, not out front on the street and stuff. And I know that, there's allowances for that stuff as well, but I would hope maybe also that the applicant would be respectful of the neighbors and make sure that it's not just out there just because or something. So, any other comments or discussion?
I agree with you, Kevin, and I agree with you, Becky. I think this logo is different than what you'd see on a trailer on average. Not that you couldn't find a nice, sweet boat with big red shenanigans on top. Wakeboarders maybe do that, but skier myself.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. But I'm inclined to agree with Kevin that while I'm mindful of the neighbors' concerns about a big object there, they have rights to that right now with a trailer. And as I tried to figure out this conditional use, the added burden that comes on, I boiled it down to what Becky and Corey did. It's signage and how the business signage might differ from residential usage. And if this were on the back end of the house, the south end, I feel like we maybe requiring screening, a 6-foot fence to help block some of that would be appropriate. But because we have the retaining wall and a fence there, I agree with Kevin that I just don't know that requiring additional screening on top of that is a fair and reasonable thing to do.
Is it possible to require screening from the street, like at the garage level?
Well,
as a condition?
that's what we're talking about.
I thought you were talking about the side property.
No, from the street. So in order to cover that front of the trailer from the street, you'd have to put up a 12-foot fence.
Yeah, but I'm not
Well,
talking
but you
about the
could
12-foot
even just
fence. You
do-
know I'm against that.
I'm for the 12-foot fence. Just
He is for this minute. Not yet. Hang on just a second. But did you?
I'm just saying a fence at the garage to the property line or something would go, in my book, would go a long way.
I think so too.
like you gate it.
Like a gate.
A gate.
Because you have the screening on the east side with the retaining and this, which is not still going to cover it, but it'll do something. And then having, if you had the gate or something required in the front, then at least that would make sure that it was pushed as far back as possible and there's screening there. I would like to even see it covered. I'd like to see a cover on it because of the signage.
But again, that if you were to put a fence along that garage, you put a 6-foot fence there, that only covers half of that front. There's still going to be 5 feet sticking up above it that's unscreened, and that's probably going to be the part that has the logo on it. And so
That's why I think it should be also covered. I think, obviously, if it were an RV, I mean, personally, RVs are huge, and no one's like, yay, I have an RV parked right next to me. Like, no one loves that. But obviously, that's a right that we have, the ability to do that if you have an RV parking. But I really do feel like this is very different than an RV. I think it's great that we have residents that are, operating their own businesses, and I think that's a great idea. But I do think that when it comes into the residential area, there's a huge thing that we have to consider, and that is what it looks like and how it affects the feeling of that residential neighborhood. So I would be inclined to mitigate that issue. I would be inclined to require a complete cover of the wrap, and I like the idea of a front gate as well that you mentioned.
okay. So, first of all,
I move that we reopen the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. If anybody from the public would like to come up and speak.
Again, it's Cheryl Hardy. I have a question for you. is the signage the whole height of the trailer, or is it just on the bottom quadrant?
So specifically in the front where you would be seeing, is that what you're asking about? So actually 6 foot.
Can you talk?
hold on,
and you
yeah.
need to, yeah.
Sorry.
So just
Are you-
make
are
your
you-
comments, and then we need you to.
Yeah, are you done with your comment, your
Wait,
question?
Yeah, basically, I just want to know how much of the trailer it covers. I like the idea of a cover
Yeah,
going over it, but
Yeah.
if the signage is only like around the bottom 6 feet quadrant, and then a fence went up, we're not going to see it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be, you know, like, I mean, it's a beautiful sign. He's done a great job on that, but to think about that being 11 feet by how many, 30-something?
35.
yeah.
That's big, that's really big. But, you know, I mean, if there was some way to cover it, I mean, it would be an RV cover, whatever, trailer cover would be great. But that was my question, is just how much of the trailer it actually covered.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak to the issue? Seeing nobody else, I will close the public hearing again and invite the applicant to come and respond. Thank you.
So a couple of things here. The front portion of the trailer is not 35 feet long, obviously. That's just the sides that we've already discussed. So the front portion is going to be much higher than the 6 foot because the generator already covers the logo to probably about 6 feet. So our logo was actually moved up so it would be visible above the generator. So a 6 foot fence wouldn't even cover the logo at all. And then as far as the cover goes, I don't know about, you know, a 35 by 8.5 by 11 cover, but I think it would be possible to get some sort of, I don't know, white, you know, tarp or something nice that I could cover the front with at least. I don't know how well I would be able to cover the whole trailer. So that's what I have.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to weigh in on an enforcement issue.
Go ahead.
It's the blue tarp syndrome. You know, the common way you see around the cities when people store stuff that's prized to them and bothered everybody else is, well, stack it neat and throw a blue tarp over. And I personally, through the years, find the blue tarp as obnoxious as anything else, particularly as it gets weathered and beat up and blown around. So
It has an Aggie symbol on it with a big A. I love it.
Harvard of the West.
if it's you know something in the historic past, it has much more meaning, you know, as a blue tarp versus the red tarp. But anyhow, so I caution you on the tarping issue. I mean, I think the creative idea is you could probably come up with a system that has a covered tarp on the front, screening the view. If it were the world according to me, so I'm giving you an enforcement position, the world according to me, which is meaningless. But if screening's an issue, I think the gate is your limitation, because the gate provides a visual space between what's happening through the front yard. Your eye catches the gate. Now I'm going into the design parameter of why we put nice things on the fronts of buildings and use architectural design. The gate softens that. Even if it's sticking up above, a gate softens that appearance, takes the starkness of something big sitting there, and it looks tucked away. You can still see it, true, but it looks tucked away. So if screening's an issue, I think that's the place to go rather than even the front cover on the tarp. Because what enforcement comes into is if somebody's irritated and somebody comes back from a party event, and let's say they go to a state fair, come back at the midnight, park it, don't put the tarp on, first thing in the morning, who's getting the call that the tarp's not on? And that takes up a lot of time in enforcement. So if the tarp, from my position, really mitigates something, yeah, sure, look at it. But I'm not seeing that it mitigates something. So a visual, I'd limit it to a gate, softens that view, sets it back tucked away, and most people ignore that. It's like the telephone pole lines. Do you recognize them on Main Street? Do you ever see them?
Yes.
Until you
Yes.
start looking.
Just on
All the
poles that
time,
go like
yes,
this.
Yeah, just
I
the poles
do.
like that.
With wires.
But you can drive through lots of cities, and those poles up above just kind of disappear out of the eyesight. You might see them from time to time. You might notice one is bent, But generally, I would bet that your drive down Main Street, you don't notice the poles most of the time. I think that's the principle in the design. If screening's an issue, the gate will solve and soften that. And the party, the number, whatever the logo will be, the Y or the U, just becomes somebody who wants to make that an issue.
Don't avoid saying the A.
So Corey, can you require screening for an actual, not a tarp, but a cover that fits?
You can. They can order them, and they make them in pretty large sizes. They're very cumbersome.
You can make them custom.
Yeah, they're very.
stuff.
I have a neighbor that has a 40-foot trailer and puts a cover on it, and I watch that struggle, and know that it will deteriorate through time, not only from the UV and everything for a long duration. It will just, the use of it becomes cumbersome, and that's why I'm just not a fan. And then the enforcement, heaven forbid that it went 24 hours uncovered because there's a next event coming around tomorrow night,
Right.
and I'm fighting that cover.
So, Corey, then on that issue, in the recommended motion here, item number 4 says, when parked on the property, the trailer must meet the screening requirements as established by the Planning Commission. Would we essentially just replace item 4 with our requirements?
Yes.
Or?
Yep, replace 4 if you think it's pertinent.
And then you said, so right now, the acceptable height with a CUP, can't we CUP all the way up to 10 feet?
CUP what?
The fact that it's a business is the CUP.
Yeah, the fact is the business is using outside of the home to store something, and the type of use puts it into the CUP category.
But I'm saying that the approved height for a fence currently is
That's
6 feet.
next-
6 feet.
but
And
isn't
then,
it next to a commercial zone that you can get that?
Yeah, you have to be where a differing zone mitigates.
okay,
And you're not in that case. You're in the core of the RL area, so the 6 foot is the
so the
limit.
6 is the highest we can go?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one more thing before we get to the potential motion. Condition number 9 in the staff report says the applicant may store any product or materials for the business outside of the dwelling except for the trailer itself. I'm guessing that should say may not store.
Correct.
Okay. And then suggested reasons for the action number 4, the use of a home rental center for inflatable recreation equipment does not appear to be detrimental. Is that copy paste from somewhere else?
Yes.
What should that say?
Gaming trailer.
The use of a
Home gaming
gaming trailer.
does not.
Recreational vehicle.
The storage of a home gaming trailer, does not appear to be detrimental to the surrounding community.
Commercial, recreational vehicle, whatever
With
you
the
want.
conditions imposed would not impact it.
Keep yourself ready.
That's what you get when you
Jeez,
do a late night
Kevin.
report.
Well, that's what you get when Kevin's the chair.
Listen, there's like this pressure, all right, so. Hang on just a second, I'm making a note here.
There may be inflatable recreation equipment in Bragg, but I'm not sure.
Inside the trailer.
Seats.
Okay, hang on, can't write that fast. I can type faster, but can't write that fast. To be detrimental to the surrounding community with the conditions imposed. Oh, you can add that. Okay,
Do we address in here that they're not allowed to park on the home?
I did not include
The-
anything about the
other-
parking on the street, but I did include conditions about parking within the, past the setbacks of the driveways.
I'm
So if you
saying,
wanted to include anything about on-street parking.
I'm just saying, is this approving parking on any of the driveways or just the one?
Just the one, unless they change it.
And so it says it right there. Which one does that, which condition addresses
Will
that?
eliminate the curb cut on Doris or receive city approval from.
Perfect.
yeah, it's
Thank you.
number 3.
Thank you.
Okay. So, for number 4, condition number 4, well, we've talked about this a little bit, and I would like to kind of propose for number 4 that as a, I don't know.
Condition.
A concession, right? A compromise would be a 6-foot gate right there. That accomplishes 2 things in my mind. One, it helps to ensure that the setback is met, because you got to get it behind the gate.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, while it wouldn't cover the entire front of it, that goes to what Corey was talking about and does kind of break it up and make it look like it's been neatly put away,
Yeah.
instead of still sticking out somewhere.
It cleans it
And that
up a lot.
allows the owner to, easily comply instead of trying to fuss with a cover that may or may not always get on. Do we say 6-foot fence that is like
Yeah, screening fence and
screening
gate.
fence and gate?
Yeah,
Okay,
6-foot screening fence and gate.
so that way it's not open chain link or anything.
Okay, so then I would say for condition number 4, when parked on the property, the trailer must be parked, stored.
Stored in the approved parking area.
Behind a closed 6-foot screening fence and gate.
Stored in the approved parking area behind a 6-foot screening fence and gate.
Do we have to say closed 6-foot?
No.
Well, it'd be behind the
Be
fence.
behind it. Oh, the screening's defined in the ordinance as 90% opaque.
Yeah. I'm saying whether the gate is open or closed.
I don't think we can regulate it.
Then with that, I will go ahead and make a motion. I hereby make a motion to approve the home occupation conditional use permit for Epic Party Events LLC at 1092 Doris Street with conditions 1 through 3 in the staff report. Condition number 4, which shall read, when parked on the property, the trailer must be stored in the approved parking area behind a 6-foot screening fence and gate. And then conditions 5 through 8 in the staff report, and condition number 9, the applicant may not store any product or materials for the business outside of the dwelling except for the trailer itself, with suggested reasons for action 1 through 3. Number 4, which should read, the storage of a gaming trailer does not appear to be detrimental to the surrounding community with the conditions imposed, and 5 through 9 from the staff report.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion or comment on the motion?
Yes, I'm going to attempt an amendment. I hereby make a motion to amend the motion to approve, specifically by striking number 4. And as a little explanation for that, I just feel like we're putting a burden on the property owner to do something that is reasonably able to do by an RV owner, and I respect the analysis on its ability to screen, but hearing the owner say that logo is going to be up high anyway, I wonder if it's much ado about nothing. That is my amendment.
Do we have a second?
Can you read 4 again so I can understand what's being amended?
Yeah, so the motion was,
To strike it.
Didn't you alter
You want,
4?
yeah, you want to hear what 4?
Yeah, I want to hear what 4 is before.
Great. So 4 says, when parked on the property, the trailer must be stored in the approved parking area behind a 6-foot screening fence and gate.
And you want to amend that?
He wants to
I
kill that whole
want to
thing.
amend to strike 4. Yeah.
Do you have a second?
Cassie?
The motion fails because there was no second. Sorry, Logan.
Can I make a comment on that motion?
Yes.
And on the overall motion, the amendment and the overall motion? I actually agree a little bit with Logan that it's not going to cover it. And I actually think that the screening will not mitigate the problem. And I am not inclined to approve this motion because I think that is a significant change to a residential area. I mean, having a huge commercial wrapped vehicle, in my opinion, is very different than a large RV. And when you're in a small residential area with close streets, they don't even have sidewalks. I mean, they're very close to their neighbors. It has a very small town feel to have a very loud, large, commercially wrapped. I mean, there are other places to store this. There are so many other places to store a trailer, a commercial trailer, other than at your home. My brother owns his own business, and he has to store his commercial business trailer off-site of his residential home because generally commercial business trailers don't fit in a residential area. And if we as a planning commission cannot find an acceptable way to mitigate that issue by screening, then I feel like it's not something that we should approve. But that's just my opinion.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, I feel like the 6-foot fence is a good compromise for that. I'm inclined to say no screening because I don't see it being any different than an RV, and I'm sure you can go and find an RV that has some pretty wild and crazy graphics on it. So I don't see it being any different than an RV, but I feel like this is kind of a middle ground to something more extreme. So. Any other comments? Then we will vote on the motion to approve, and we'll start with Commissioner Wright.
Nay.
Aye.
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 The motion passes. It's good discussion, everyone. Thank you. All right. We will move on now to the next item on our agenda, which has also been scheduled for a public hearing. This is a administrative decision to consider the proposed conceptual site plan for Oak Ridge Assisted Living Facility located at 451 West Rollins Circle. Turn the time over to staff.
All right, thank you. So a long time ago, before Corey was even here, an assisted living facility was approved with a site plan on 451 Rollins Circle. The first building was built, and the foundation for the second building was poured and then never built. So it has been sitting there for at least 15 years, possibly more. And now in 2015, Oak Ridge Assisted Living has come in and bought the property and would like to finish out the site and build some more homes there. They also recently acquired this parcel and will need to officially combine them all together. But they basically want to finish the plans that were originally approved many, many years ago with some improvements. So we don't really know why the site originally was never built as approved, but we think it has to do with parking and landscaping calculations because the site is very tight. So they would like to just add on to the existing building and finish out this second building. So it would be a total of 16 beds on the site. And with this second now addition of property, they think they can meet the landscaping and parking standards for the site. So let me just bring up the conceptual plan. So this is what the site looks like now. So this is the assisted living facility, and this is that second piece that they recently acquired that's just currently being used to store trailers and parking equipment from the neighbor. So I think this is a good opportunity to add in some more landscaping and kind of make a nice street visual appearance from the road, from this cul-de-sac. So I think that this is definitely possible because they do need to get their landscaping increased. Right now, they're currently at 30% of their landscaping. 40% is required because this is a residential medium zone. And so if they wanted to keep it at 30%, they would need that landscaping waiver to go anything under 40, and the minimum is 30% landscaping on a lot like this. So based on their site plan right now, they have 30, and they do have more parking than is required. So our zoning code actually only requires 5 parking stalls. And so this parking is existing, which is adequate for the site, and then they're adding this parking lot as well. And I know that they probably want to add some extra parking stalls for family members of the residents and any guests, but I don't know that they need the whole thing, especially because they are so under landscaped at this site. So right now they are adding 8 parking stalls over here with a little bit of landscaping. So they would really have to significantly cut some of their parking in order to get to that 40%, but I think that there can be some medium space that they cut their parking down, maybe under 40% landscaping, but still keeping the parking that they want and getting a little bit over the 30% landscaping requirement. So either way that they would most likely still have to submit a landscaping waiver to be under that 40% calculation. So an official landscaping plan hasn't been submitted, so in terms of the counts of the shrubs and the trees is still to be determined because this was still at a very conceptual stage, so I didn't want to finalize anything. But that will have to be submitted with their final site plan and see if they meet the standards for the counts of shrubs and trees on the property line. But with this, a new addition of property, I think they have a good chance to make it look really nice, and hopefully they can find a way to do that. I submitted the elevations, and it's going to be a pretty modest, just 1-story assisted living facility, just adding 16 beds. So this property has just been a problem lot for a few years because there's such a tight restriction on the size of the property. So we hope that with the addition of this property that it can all work out. So are there any questions?
Questions for staff? Great. Then in that case, we would like to invite the applicant to come forward and speak on this matter. If you'd introduce yourself, please.
My name's Tyler Young. What questions can I answer?
Would you, well, unless you have a specific, I was going to say, or was there anything from the staff report that you had any concerns, specifically maybe to discuss the landscaping, the idea of landscaping?
Yeah, that's no problem. So we took over the building in 2015, and this lot there's currently no trailers, nothing stored on there. So that picture's a little bit older. When we purchased the property, we gave him 30 days to vacate all of his trailers. And there's 3 sheds on there right now. 2 of them should be gone by Saturday, and then the following within the next 30 days. So we're just prepping everything for whatever trees, shrubs to be compliant. So as far as what we're adding, we're not adding 16 beds, we're adding 10. So we have some existing on our building right now that will continue to carry over. So we're adding 10 new beds in this proposed addition here. So when it comes to parking and things like that, we're open to being compliant. For us to reach that 40%, we ultimately need to eliminate that entire parcel parking. And the reason why we acquired it was for safety, increased for the fire department, EMT, to have multiple points of access into our building. Secondly, for food supplies and things like that being dropped off, it's just easier for the truck to pull up right there without disrupting any of the front parking lot. So we opted into keeping it over that 30% just because of the utility and the benefit that we would have from maintaining an additional inlet to the back side of our building. And we also have an existing garage that was built when the building was there that we've never had access to until we purchased parcel A. So that's kind of our objective is we weighed out, okay, how many parking stalls do we need? And one of our proposals would be if we wanted to take off, if we're talking about the curb appeal, we could take off these front two and possibly this one here.
Here's your high-tech laser.
Yeah, I like it. So if we were looking for the curb appeal, we could have the survey company bring it back to here, eliminate these two. This is all grass and shrubbery, and then that would give us 6 additional, and if that doesn't work, we could bump this out a little bit here too. So we're open to increasing that, but with us in the logistics, do you mind if I put that right there? It makes more sense for us to have that as an additional access. So 40%, yeah, we would need to apply for the waiver.
So how far back, because this was my question I was going to ask, could you potentially have the first part, parking, and then the back part grass with maybe like a sidewalk around so guests or something could take a walk around the back and there could be grass at the back? Or are you trying to really get back? Where are you trying to access exactly?
So the reason why I talked about we could close this one off and grass it is because we do want to maintain access
right
to this
there.
garage.
Okay.
So being able to flip that if we need to ever, load supplies with the trailer, right, things like that, backing a truck in, it just makes more sense for us to maintain at least 3 spots here. When it comes to greenery, as I mentioned, that'll bump us with those 3 being turned into green space. And that still gives us the functionality of having, family members park there walking in and then maintaining this also. So 3 on the back side. And whether that's 3 or 2, it's neither here nor there. I'm just thinking as we back up, when we start swinging the truck.
Just part of brainstorming in the discussion. I realize that we've got to come with a final site plan and look at any modifications, but I'm just weighing in on design. The 2 handicap stalls, I know they're important because they're supposed to be to the closest front door for part of the building. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to relocate the 2 handicap stalls to the south and then bump up the landscaping through in there and still meet the ADA?
So one of the things that we've looked at is the new entrance is here, and we'll have a little cover. And so this will actually drop down so the wheelchair can come directly here. Ultimately, we're likely to lose that parking stall completely. And so if we can maintain those 2 here, I'm fine switching handicap and then moving things around. We can make it work, and they actually gave us the survey. They flipped our parking lot a few times, and when they flipped it the other way, we ended up having to remove this portion here, and it just didn't function and flow like it does right now.
Yeah, I just think that the turn radius to the handicap's a little bit rough.
And so, one of those things is this is ultimately we're going to lose this space just with this new covered entry, our main entrance to the building. You can see that in the elevation. So that's why I'd like to at least maintain these 2 here, because if we lose 2 here, now it gives me some flexibility where if I'm parking here and the staff are here, okay, well, does the handicap make sense on this side, or do we need to look at it over here? Right. It just kind of gives me more freedom.
So if you were to take out probably 3 on that side, 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom, do we know roughly how much that would give us for?
We're at almost 31 right now. I think we'd be close to like 33.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much regardless, you'll still need a landscaping waiver modification, because even if they want to keep any of the stalls on this side, just because of the width of the driveway and everything, they'll still be under 40%. It's just a matter of between 30 and 40, you can still change some things around to make it look nice up front and keep some parking stalls. Yeah. You don't have to go all the way down to 30. There's a middle ground.
So just to clarify one thing, you're adding 10 beds to go up to 16? That's where you'll be?
16 total. So the state of Utah, we're a level 1 assisted living, which is the lowest level of care, and it's 16 to 1. So that's our staffing, so that's what we'll build our building to.
So that's why in our staff report it mentions 2 staff maximum? So that's typically what you'd have.
So we'll have 2 staff, and then you'll have like a physician who will come in, a nurse and things like that, but they're not salaried staff. So they're just fluctuating based off of visits.
Right.
Okay.
You mentioned that your surveyor or someone swapped the parking. Are you talking about on the left side?
No, what they did is ultimately, we wanted to look at being able to pull in and pull out, and so they flipped these lines so it was actually heading to the east. And it just didn't lay out right because ultimately where our new entrance is here. We have a double door on this elevation you'll see. So this will actually be recessed right here, and that leaves this parking stall right here is no longer even valuable. It's gone.
So currently there's already, I mean, the property has the parking already, that dark shaded part is already, that's how it looks.
The light shaded part.
Yeah, the light is our existing right now.
What about the dark shaded? Is that at all like that right now? Or it's just?
It's got asphalt. You can see right here.
Oh, that
where it
light
runs
shaded
all
right
the
there.
way.
Okay.
So that currently does have
So you're gonna have to
asphalt.
change that anyway. I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if having the lawn or something a little bit more accessible, I mean, that little jut of lawn, who's gonna use that? And how's it gonna be used, you know? I feel like there should be maybe, I wonder if you could flip the parking or something where you could have that lawn part of the.
Right next to the building.
Right next to the building, and you could also flip where the front lawn is to make that a better opening instead of currently where you have the grass and then immediately the driveway, you know?
So the only factor is we have all of our utilities and their sidewalks here. And that's why when they came out, they said without disrupting things, the easiest thing was just for us to bring more grass over here. Because we have to remove this asphalt anyways. We can pull sprinkler lines and things like that. If our biggest concern is making it usable, we can push this so it's coming on all the front side is all grass. And the back side can be a parking lot. We can make it work if we're looking for that front side curb appeal of more grass. The thing that we need to realize is our residents have wheelchairs and they have power chairs and walkers. And so when we look at grass, it's completely different to you and I with my little kids versus someone who's a traumatic brain injury who's in a wheelchair because he only has one hand.
So you could even, instead of having grass, have, you know, planters or something up in the front of the actual site so that you can, again, that curb appeal is a big part of what makes it nice.
Courtyard
Yeah.
sitting area.
Courtyard, sitting area, yeah.
And that's not a problem. We just,
Patio.
we didn't want to hire out someone to come in and actually engineer and design everything because I think we were off by one shrub is what I think for compliance. Tree count was there and I think there was one shrub we were off. And so we just wanted to get to this point when it comes to the layout and things like that. We want to take an older building and make it modern. We want to make it aesthetically pleasing. We've looked at some different things to make the front, bring it up with signage and trees so it doesn't scream an assisted living, but it's still nice and in the 21st century. So that's our objective. So whether that means shrubs and bushes and things like that, we can work all those details out.
Will you be removing the fence
Which fence?
in between?
It's already gone.
It's gone.
Yeah, those pictures are outdated. So trailers are gone, everything's gone. We've removed the fence. There will be a vinyl fence running along this side.
Okay.
So,
And you'll be using the existing foundation that's been poured there?
that's what we're anticipating. They're gonna come out and the contractor's been out several times and gives us the green light. So the only thing we'll be adding is there's a 25-foot gap in between, so there'll be new footings and foundations poured here on those sides.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing as well, and we would like to invite any members of the public who'd like to come and speak to do so at this time. Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Any further questions for staff or the applicant? Great. And somebody like to make a motion?
Actually, I do have a question for the staff. When we accept this conceptual site plan, and we, give the conditions that are here, can we also, when we're talking about the final landscaping plan, and that'll happen later, would it be an appropriate time to encourage the applicant to try to make steps to make it, the curb appeal greater, or to reconsider, like he discussed? Would it be appropriate to put that in the conditions, or what do you think?
This is your time to give direction.
Okay.
I think your direction here is there's the highest likelihood that some modifications is going to be requested in order to accommodate this, and to some degree, staff is open to that discussion in recommendations. So I think you give them some expectations to look at, so that they have a chance to come back and address that, of why they could do it, or what did they find in considering that made that problematic.
Okay.
And then that can be determined as they ask for the waiver, what the final outcome is.
So Corey, that's direction we would give now, and then would that be part of the conditional use permit, or is that part of?
It'd be part of just your conceptual, and then we'll
conceptual.
finalize the conditional use and final site plan together.
We'll do the CUP in the final later.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, typically the commission is not issued a conditional use permit prior to seeing a final site plan.
Yeah,
So
makes sense.
Okay, well, I just want to weigh in for just a second. For the applicant to consider in the landscaping, having spent a lot of time at assisted livings over a few years, I think like a courtyard or something on there, if that parking could be adjusted differently to make it so there's a place that they can go out and be, so that there's still landscaping, but a place for them to be other than inside a building only. I just think it's really an important aspect of assisted living. So I just want that to be a part of the consideration, that we allow some of that. And in some ways that takes away from the landscaping because of the wheelchairs, but there's ways to beautify it with landscaping and still allow for that to be.
Well, and I was even thinking you could have like a paved path that goes around. I mean, there is a path that goes around already, currently part of it. But I mean, you could have something that goes around some landscaping that has a path or something, so they could walk or get pushed in a wheelchair or something that still, obviously thinks about who those patrons are and who the people there in that location would be. So I think it might be appropriate to add a 7th condition that says the applicant shall work with staff to, work on some landscaping ideas that are appropriate to the actual business and appropriate to, improving curb appeal or something like that.
Enhancing for the curb appeal and for the residents.
And for the residents.
I mean, that might be better as an addition to number 5, condition number 5.
Okay, yeah. I mean, either way, I just think it needs to be somewhere in there where we're directing the applicant to work with staff. It sounds like he's very flexible and amenable to trying to figure out what works for him and what works for the city. So just maybe making sure that we're improving curb appeal and addressing the needs of the residents.
Would you like to recommend some language for 5?
Sure.
I know. Yeah.
I recommend that language that I just said. That the applicant shall work with staff to come up with a landscaping plan that addresses the needs of the residents as well as the desire to improve curb appeal. There you go.
Okay. Wait, the landscaping plan.
Because I'm
that.
not so much hung up about, you know, the number of stalls. They're obviously well over the parking count. I think we keep it for what works for them as far as parking, but while also looking at trying to improve that landscaping.
What was the end of that? Comes up with a landscaping plan that
Enhances.
enhances.
Did you want enhance?
Oh, Kathy wants enhance.
No, I'm.
That enhances curb appeal and addresses the needs of the residents.
Okay. Okay. The needs of the residents.
I feel like the applicant had something more to say.
Okay. I'd like to invite the applicant to come back and, sorry, I had my head down writing over
You
here.
did. I kept waiting for you to look.
So we currently have, over here in this corner, we had a slab poured for a big pergola,
Oh, good.
or a gazebo, excuse me, and that's there. So when you talk about a courtyard feel, ultimately we'll be removing this slab here to hit our numbers, and that will be moved over here. So that's why you see the breakup in the parking lot. See, our understanding was we just wanted to meet the criteria for the numbers. When it comes to the functionality and looking out for our residents, if you were to flip to the layout, we're adding a theater room that's also a multi-purpose room for activities. We have a therapy gym that's in there, and then they'll have all this access to go and walk with physical therapists and guests who come in. So we're completely mindful of that, but in preparation for this, we just wanted to make sure you understood we were hitting the requirements in the code enforcement. So currently, if you were actually to see a picture right now, it's over here in this corner, that will give you a courtyard feel with some lamps and things like that that we've been looking at. I just didn't know how detailed.
Yeah, and
I needed to
we'll
be.
work with them on some of the
Yeah, and I feel
design,
like-
and then we'll come back with some answers to those questions and how the functionality influences the layout and, but I think
Right.
there's some small, I mean,
Yeah, personally, I'd like to see the parking.
small
on the front.
expectations that could be well-meaning and work with the constrained site, so
So I think that'll work. I think we'll go with what has been recommended, and it says to work with staff, and staff does a really good job of understanding kind of where that is and being reasonable, so.
Well, and
yeah.
the fact that you're aware that obviously you're not going to quite hit that 40%, we already kind of know that going in. But there's specific reasons for that. That's where staff can work with you and talk about what works for you and why that works.
We're in a very competitive industry, and if you look at our surrounding cities, I'm born and raised in Bountiful, and you see that big facility that's down on 4th South, or 4th North, excuse me. We realize that the aesthetics of the building is what we have to say, hey, you are looking at this other building, we're
Yeah.
smaller,
Yeah,
so come over here. So we understand the aesthetics of the building and
Right.
making that curb appeal.
perfect.
And once again, we just wanted to make sure that you guys understood functionality, flow of the building, parking, and hitting these criteria. So when it comes to the marketing aspect and making sure, we've looked at different things to make sure the front of our building, the inside of our building, landscaping, everything is competitive.
Yeah.
Great.
No, I think that's good. When it comes back to it, when it comes down to it, and we come back to this, the waiver will be an important part. And essentially, I'm sensitive to these landscaping waivers because to me, what it comes down to is essentially there's no other way to do it, right? And in this case, you've presented some real clear reasons why there's some challenges to making it work. And what I'll be looking for is, this is the best we could do to make it work, but we can't get there because of this, that, and whatever else. And so that's what I'm looking for is kind of, we really tried to make it work, but we can't. And here's why we can't, but here's what we did to try and the best we could. So
Okay.
anyway. Okay.
Any other questions?
No. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right. Then, any other comments from the commission? Then, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to accept the conceptual site plan for Oak Ridge Assisted Living Facility at 451 Rollins Circle with conditions 1 through 6 as we amended.
Okay.
And reasons for the action 1 through 3 in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? No? Then on the motion to accept the conceptual site plan, we'll start with Commissioner Hinsey.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on to item number 4. And this has been scheduled for a public hearing, because why not? We're going to consider the proposed zoning text amendment for the Centerville Zoning Code, Chapter 12.48, the South Main Street Overlay Zone, regarding but not limited to definitions and development standards of civic/cultural lots in the zone. And we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission, as you indicated, we're looking at one of 2 parts. That we need to look at them separately because the first part is looking at changes to our zoning code, and the second part is the same petitioner then seeking discussion on a conceptual site plan. So we'll address the amendments first, and then that will set the tone of how the conceptual is addressed later. As indicated in your packet with the submittals, they provided a letter indicating to you what they would like to amend. We summarize those in our staff report. I'll generally hit those really quick and where staff provided some comment on it. First, the context and the setting of staff's view of the amendments. We are in the middle of the discussion about Main Street, and our Main Street plan was developed in 2007, adopted in 2008, amended, I think, in 2010. And then significantly amended just, nearly 3.5 years ago, addressing some density and public space plan that was a part of that Main Street plan. Our position from our view is not that the current ordinance is a bad ordinance. I think there are certainly those who feel it's a missed ordinance for Centerville City from a planner. It's a form-based code designed around a central city center and a small town core kind of place. Now, small town's relative, but if you look at 25th Street in Ogden, Midvale and its downtown, Kanab and its downtown, Brigham City, its downtown, form-based code is built around those styles of development. Whether that's something that's likable or not is always open for debate. In Centerville, it's been open for debate. So our view at this point is that to strictly approach the amendments solely based on that general plan that's in place and the zoning ordinance in place, it was not our approach in a defense. In the past, if that plan had greater support, we would probably broach it from a defense position. Our view is that it will probably be compromised to some extent. Now, that compromise could be small edits to a holistic rejection in a new corridor type plan. And that corridor type plan has been presented to the city as a potential replacement, but has not been under sufficient debate. So our viewpoint is that there is room for change. The question is to what extent should that change be in place? So that's how we broached it, that there is some room for change. They would like to amend, particularly the form-based code's view of a retail center with buildings close to the street. They would like to amend the requirement for an opportunity, or the requirement of providing, an entrance feature every 50 feet. That's the idea of some shopping. It's the entrance, and the next 50 feet you can have another entrance. Whether it's the same store or not, it's the idea on a walkable street that every place has something to turn into, adventure to, discover the next, what's around the corner, what's the next shop, what's the next opportunity. So that 50-foot requirement they would like to amend. They'd also like to amend the ratio amount, and there's, for a courtyard, and there's two sets of ratios. The first ratio is how far back can you take a building from its required build line. We allow a building to be set back further, additional 20 feet if you provide a plaza and a courtyard in that form-based design. That's a pedestrian amenity. They're not amending the ratio of depth. They're amending the width. Currently, we allow 40% of the building width that's lining the street, parallel to the street. We can let 40% of that setback be reduced to put in a plaza. And they would like to take that to 75% of the building frontage can be replaced with a plaza rather than 40% of the building wall. They would like to amend the floor elevation limit. This is the 12 inches above sidewalk. This is the concept that you're walking down the street, you're on the sidewalk, there's just a small step up into the retail center. That is a typical form design to a shopping area, is you're not going up 12, 15 steps into the shopping. It's a small step up and you're into the shop floor. Then you pick up any grade differences in the back half of the building as needed if there's a grade change. They'd like to amend that 12 inches. Their idea is they have grade to the property, the way the building is sit, the apparatus bay for the fire creates a situation where it'll slope off, and rather than dig back into the lot and change grade midway through the building, they would like not to have to do that and just bump the building to its final grade, and the approach of the apron would be exceeding that 12 inches. So they'd like to amend that. The new driveway access limitations. Currently is a prohibition for a new driveway. There's an encouragement for shared driveways or replacement of driveways if you want a new driveway location. Their issue is they have an existing driveway. It's insufficient width for the apparatus bay for it. So they'd like to add a component that an existing driveway can be expanded to be much wider than the limitation of the 35 feet. That's typical of a commercial approach. And then the last one, they would like to amend the solid void requirement. This is the idea if you have a main storefront, instead of most of it being brick, the solid void on a retail strip would be more windows than brick. As you'll see that the display windows are a predominant feature of the first floor elevation, and they would like to amend that. Their elevation involves their apparatus bay doors, and the function of those doors makes it difficult for them to meet that. So they'd like to change those. In a text amendment, you're looking at the general plan. In the case of Main Street, our significant element of the general plan is our South Main Street corridor. So we call out what we think are the general applicable. Understand there's corridor-wide policies, and then there's sector policies, rooms within the corridor, as we call them. You know, you have a living room, bathroom. Well, they have a traditional, their fire station is going to be in the traditional district. And so that's interesting because that's different than the civic district. Civic district is where our city hall is located. Down on 3rd South, that's in the traditional retail expected place, and they're putting in a civic building. The civic lot is by the way, is allowed in that district, but it doesn't change the expectations of the building form and design in the traditional district. So they'd like to change that. So we go through and try to address that. So we bulleted it and said, okay, let's start with the access drive discussion. You know, the concept is when you have a walkable street, you don't want a dozen curb cuts interrupting that. You want a single point or a shared point and distribute those in between so you have stretches of walking area for the pedestrian. From their standpoint, they're trying to double the issue that addressing the courtyard feature, but it's also the issue of their apparatus bay. The idea is the pedestrians should be moving through that, not standing around, particularly during emergency call, and they'd like to change that. From our standpoint, you know, this is a design call. Reducing driveways good for the form-based code, but driveways exist. You have to deal with them. Not everybody's going to get together and share a driveway all the time, so you will have the inconveniences of some driveways occurring there. I think the difference between a driveway for a public parking lot would be different than an apparatus bay. I think that's an easy call to make. The apparatus bay is only for the function of the emergency vehicles at the time of call out, because they will rotate to the back and enter the bay. You know, they may come out onto the bay pad, do their maintenance back into the facility, even though everybody does not like the back in issue. I know the chief doesn't want any of his folks backing in vehicles, especially when they leave the apparatus bay doors up and then they drive usually out than in. No. So there's problems that way, but I think that's an argument to be made that there are certain types of places where you will have a disruption. If it's a limited disruption for limited use, that can still function in a form-based area. So we make the argument that that is a change that could be considered. The building entrances. You know, this is a tough one because we do call out that in the traditional district, a civic lot is allowed by interesting fact, and a civic use is drastically different than the retail use. So the building entrances are important, particularly if you're thinking a lifestyle center. You go to Farmington and into their plaza area, there's doors and entrances all up and down the streets. It's very interesting from that standpoint. If we allow a civic use, which we do, I think the civic use, there is an argument that you don't want a ton of entrances into a civic facility. They are controlled access points, whether you're doing with a courthouse and a controlled access point, city hall area and controlled access points. Civics buildings have a tendency to be a targeted place, and so there are security concerns. There's even a consultant that's gone through this building and raised some issues with security in this building, like that glass area needs to be replaced. And so I think if we're allowing civic uses, there's room in the code to say when we're using a civic use type place, the 50-foot entrance is not really a pertinent issue in that case. So there's room for that. In looking at the at-grade entrances, again, we bring up the issue of the retail. I do give the bad example of the building we're sitting in. It is horrible from an entrance from the public street. Nobody uses it, and nobody wants to salt it during the wintertime, so it gets roped off and it's not used as a main entrance. To change this design in an urban format, we would look at a design from my perspective if we were remodeling this building and we wanted that front pedestrian feel, we would do the step plaza system. You know, if you use the large government buildings you see in the east, or you go to Paris and they have the large plazas and then they have the multiple steps going up to till you get to the entrance of the building, but it's a place that people sit, it's a place that people hang out and talk. So I think there's room to still have the form-based, but treat the plaza, the civic buildings in a little different format than the 12 inches above grade concepts that we talk about. I bring up the issue that the civic district accommodates to some extent greater setbacks and some changes in the traditional district, but they're not in the civic district. They're in the traditional district, but the civic lot type is allowed. So is the brownstone. The brownstone residential units are usually designed a little different than the 12-inch entrance. If you think of Sesame Street, that's a perfect brownstone style, and they have the big stoops that go up. There's the other show, the family and Jesse. was Jesse was the character. Okay, I'm dating myself. Let's move on from that.
Did you say it was Cosby Kai?
Oh, didn't Cosby live in a brownstone?
Yeah, we lived in the Huxtables.
The Huxtables.
Lived in a brownstone. So even they have a different approach to its design, and we allow a brownstone type.
Are you talking about Full House?
Full House. I'm talking about Full
That's
House.
the one you chose?
Yeah, seriously, Uncle Jesse.
All the people alone.
It took me a while. I'm like,
Was that the one with the cute twins?
yeah.
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, having been here during the original adoption, this was a foray into including some form-based designs to a Main Street, still maintaining some performance standards and some traditional zoning. And so we have a hybrid. We don't have a truly form-based code. It's a hybrid of a performance standard or development standard and a form-based parameters. So we're hybrid. This was experimental, for lack of better terms, because not all the lot sizes are consistent. There's a lot of inconsistency. So we knew that there were going to be changes over time. What's happened is rather than development occurring and changes taking place over time and adapting themselves, we've had very little growth. The Manburger or Matt's Place is the only one that's really developed under the new design parameters. My opinion is even though it was implemented, it was weekly. It was a weak implementation of truly the expectations of the form-based design. And we've had the whole use, the density arguments that have really changed the nature of the Main Street plan being used. I mean, this former fire station site was a part of a project that was ultimately rejected by the community from a community feel perspective. And so we haven't really had a chance to adapt some of these standards. So my argument to you is I think there's room to have the discussion about changes. To what extent you feel comfortable, I think that's the debate tonight. But I think we did point out that some of these design changes can be accommodated in a form-based setting. And so we proposed how we would do that. This was the hardest part of the report. How do you take these arguments that there is some subtle changes and build them into the code? And so I did the best job I could at the time. I haven't had feedback from Lisa because she's been on vacation, so that's why she's not here tonight. She's also had some, not her medical, but a friend had some medical issues, and so she's been kind of taxed the last week or so in her life. So I haven't got some feedback for her, so there may be some subtle changes to the crafting of these amendments. But I tried to cover it when we were talking about the traditional Main Street sub-districts. I divided out, okay, a Main Street lot type used in this, we're going to still maintain some of those form-based, but if you use the other lot types, this is the amendment. You'll provide at least an opportunity for somebody to come from the public sidewalk and enter into the building at some type of grade rather than 15 stair steps to get to those. Other portions really centered around looking at the civic cultural lot type. If you're using the civic cultural lot type, here's your parameter, because that's very different than a traditional shopping center lot type. And so I tried to craft all of those, taking what they wanted to amend. So that's the best I could do given this walk in between their needs as a fire department, the city knowing that we'll probably make some changes, and for me recognizing that the form-based code was supposed to evolve over time and just simply really hasn't. So,
Corey, could you maybe just take a minute and highlight where your recommendations maybe differ from the request of the applicant? Because there were a couple of places where they were slightly different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue, the largest issue that we've worked on, I don't know if I called it out specifically, the largest issue I remember when we were talking with the fire department is these plaza feature is a very difficult thing to handle. they're looking at it from an apparatus bay and the idea that people shouldn't be just hanging out on a bench, but they're still putting some of that design. And you see the checkered board square that's kind of fronted as a public space. Even though the public space plan was rejected in its current form, it has a public space familiarity in the first 10 feet of its apparatus bay and a checkered board colored pattern carrying it through the landscaping. The issue of the extent of how much of that's kind of a tension, 40% of the building to 75% of the building. I think where it raises its largest issue, and I think that there's some questions, me and the architect tried to play phone tag today and didn't connect, is that the concept is when you're walking down the street, you shouldn't have large voids of anything. It should be an access to parking and start your next building, or access to parking, one set of parking stalls, and then the next building. And it's the idea that these public spaces, these buildings are closely connected together to carry through. So if you go to Park City and walk to Park City, go to 25th Street, where there's some vacancy, you'll see that they have little pedestrian plazas in those interruptions to carry you through. The idea of a courtyard was that would be that interruption, but the apparatus bay is not really fully a developed courtyard. It has a nice pedestrian feel and texture as a through walk designed and integrated into the development, but the spacing of the building on the south side to the lot line, we want the building to fill that gap to at least 15 feet. So the idea is that we don't want big swaths in between the buildings to be independent. They've filled that in with a storage building, a nicely designed storage building, but that's really not the main building wall. And so they're trying to meet that 15-foot requirement. They're trying to build that shed to carry some of that through. The reason I pull out a little bit of a disagreement and say we need to re-look at that particular site is I think that's a place where we can capitalize where the lack of the apparatus bay has for the courtyard. We can make it up in that gap area as part of the design of that accessory building. And so that you can come down, that's a place clearly defined that can be a pedestrian and hang, for lack of better terms, stop, whatever you want to do, shaded area, then walk through the apparatus bay and through apron and continue on. And so I'd like to see that further refined in the conceptual plan later as I talk about. But that's the that's the hardest part is the 75%. The glazing is important. I see their needs on the glazing and the solid to void issues. They do have some glazing. You can put some glazing in, but it is a cumbersome kind of thing to do, and I just worry about some of that solid to void. But in a civic building, that's a difficult thing to resolve because it's not a shopping building. I don't know what else I put in there because I'm sorry I got back last night in town, so I haven't had a chance to reread the code. I had to return the 90 emails and phone calls I had. So if there are specific questions that I'm not addressing, hit me up.
What about the ground floor elevation? That was one thing that I was a little bit concerned about, just the 12 inches.
12 inches?
Yeah.
I think the 12 inches is important in an urban form, and Cassie can kick me if she thinks differently, because she's probably more skilled from the master's degree in the urban form than I am, because I'm an old hack, an old golfer at this urban form. When you're dealing within the streetscape, and I'm talking about the park strip, the sidewalk, typical urban form would be about a 10 to 12 foot area that is your pedestrian form before you actually hit any building frontage. Mm-hmm. I think the 12 inches is important if the building is that close to the street. We've allowed them to push it even 10 to 15 feet past the public space, which would only be the 4-foot park strip and the 4-foot sidewalk. I think the public space plan wants a 5-foot sidewalk. And we still allow 10 to 15 more feet. So that shop experience is not truly fully a forum experience because the buildings are significantly been pushed back. This is the edits that have taken place in the past few years that have not evolved the code. It's a response to, we don't want that close urban form. So that 12 inches is important when you're adjacent to the public. If you look at the brownstone and its stoop that goes up to it, that's a distance back and is no longer the 12 inches. You either go up a half a story or you go down half a story. And so the 12 inches goes away in that case of that urban form. I think if you have a plaza form, you know, the plaza is where you can do a small bump up and you can tier system to whatever grade you need to work with that still has a pedestrian element to it. You're just making the small steps up the tier rather than the giant 16 steps in a 10-foot distance that we have in front of City Hall. So I think in a plaza situation, you can tier that and go away from the 12 inches.
So you're saying just because their setback is so far back, that sort of helps the problem of not
yeah, because they can take and they can grade up a grade entrance and still meet the 12 inches way back.
Okay.
They can use the plaza to make a step and change in the grade, which are short steps up through, and tier it that way. And I think you can compromise the 12 inches. I think the 12 inches is very important as the building is right up to the public right-of-way.
Yeah.
It becomes important as you're not hiking a bunch of stairs. You're making those, as long as there's a small step by the time you get up a few tier system in the courtyard. So I think I later recommended that at least a grade approach up to the entrance be provided to the street. Am I wrong, Cassie, in the urban form? Okay. I got an architect here. He might challenge me.
All right. Any other questions or for staff? Great. Then we will invite the applicant to come forward and speak at this time to talk about the staff report or any other comments or concerns. Please introduce yourselves.
Good evening. Whoa. Oh. This is low bid.
There you go.
All right. Jeff Bassett. I'm the fire chief for South Davis Metro Fire. This is Bill Gould. He's our architect that's been hired by the district or the service area. So I just want to thank Corey and staff. We've been going around this quite a bit. He's a busy guy and loves all of our phone calls. So we're open to any questions that you have.
I guess the only question that I would have is, as I'm assuming you've seen the staff report then and their recommendations for things, and
yeah, and we've worked a lot with Corey and staff. So again, I'm grateful for that. I think, we don't want the plaza and the checkered is like a hopscotch thing. So we're okay to color that or do whatever we need to help with that. We just don't want to make the front of the apparatus bay where people gather
a public park.
Right. Centerville is my second busiest station. So it's not a slow station. It's a busy location. So I don't want to create that environment. The fire stations, all of our stations are very, very popular in all of our communities where they're placed. We're gonna, from the people that call me that can finally come to our fire station instead of having to go to Bountiful, we're gonna have a great environment for our citizens to come in and visit and to go through and to finally be able to teach, scouts or community programs and those things that we can't do today. So we just don't want to create that environment where the bays are. I know of 2 incidents this year where there have been fatalities in front of bays at fire stations where that environment was created. That's debatable about why that person was there. There's a lot of different circumstances that surround that. But already this year, there's been 2 fatalities of people sitting down or hanging out in front of bay doors at fire stations in the United States.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? No? Apparently, you're getting off easy. No.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I live in Centerville. I don't know if a lot of you know that. I've lived here for 27 years, and for us to, in my personal opinion, finally build a very nice fire station. I've been here my entire career, and all of our fire stations have strong community elements in them, and I think we're finally going to get that in Centerville, and that it will be a building that will last. We're not going to be in the situation we're in today, where the building was built too small to start with. So, and
Okay.
we're yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, and so at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public who would like to come forward and speak to do so. Okay, seeing nobody who would wish to come forward at this time, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any further questions or comments for staff or applicant?
Yeah, before we wanted to move forward, I just wanted to voice a couple of things. The changes that have been suggested, these zoning text amendments, are significant. I feel like some of the, I mean, I don't know if I'd say they're as significant as the density decrease. It's hard to judge significance sometimes. But these are significant changes. I mean, these affect the vision that was established for Main Street by quite a bit. Now, that being said, I support these zoning text amendments. I'm behind this. But I did want to voice that it's a little bit, for lack of a better word, frustrating. The power of some applicants to influence the legislative decision making in the city, and I am fully supportive of safety and the fire department. I just imagine trying to go with zoning text amendments like this to a city and trying to get a project approved. And it feels a little bit like spot zoning. It's not spot zoning, but it feels like here's what we want to build, make the code work type of a thing. And that being said, I support these changes and good. I'm glad someone can make these types of things move, but I felt like I would be doing a disservice to my conscience if I didn't express that it seems like there's rules for some, and the rules are easier changed by others. That's all.
Well, that's a good point. I think that for me, kind of along those lines, I had a similar thought. I was like, okay, are we just doing this just because or whatnot? But I like the carve out for generally the civic or cultural lot types, and thinking about that in terms of how would we feel if another civic use were to build a similar type of a building? I'm guessing, Corey, that like the post office would be considered a civic use. Obviously, City Hall would be.
Church. Museums.
Schools. Yeah. So for some of those other types, if they were to want to build or something like that, does it make sense? Would we be okay with those types of uses, looking similar or doing, following these new revised guidelines according to those civic uses? And in my opinion, it's because those types of buildings are generally different. I mean, maybe the museum, you can put a museum anywhere, whatever, but a school, post office, fire station, they're different than just a regular commercial or regular retail type of a thing. And so I'm okay with that, carving that out, because inherently there's a difference. So.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I'd love to embrace the debate. Government always sees their roles as the different and exception. And so, but I agree I like these changes. Frankly, I would be happy making these changes without the civic cultural lot type exception, as if that's a surprise to anyone. But I sympathize with Corey's sentiments at the beginning. I don't know if you said it like this, Corey, this is how I took it. Form-based code it's a little different animal than use-based. And in this city, we kind of said, let's do a hybrid, and that created an interesting scenario. And how it's played out, it could have played out a different way if it had evolved a certain way, but how it played out is it's left us with, like, there's not the carrot with form-based, yet there's still the burden. And so I can see why this retraction on some of these things is necessary. And I want these changes. And in fact, I don't want people playing on the plaza in front of the trucks. So I don't know if these changes address that, Corey, but I would hope that if, that we can amend the text as well to address that, but that's all. Thank you.
I also felt like this obviously brings about some significant changes, and I would say too, like I said last time we proposed some significant changes, I said, if we truly follow and truly believe in this plan, then we need to help it succeed and not cut the legs out from underneath it. But if it's not succeeding, then we do need to make changes. But I think it's just something where we have to ask ourselves again, like I said last time, do we support the plan? And if we support the plan, then we have to make hard decisions to support the plan. And if we don't support the plan, or if we feel like there are things that need to be changed, then this would be an appropriate time to do so. The one thing that I thought of when I was looking at these different changes too is, I agree, obviously, I don't think any of us want anyone sitting in front of bay windows or anything like that. But I'm wondering if there are ways, like Corey was talking about, to still maintain that walkability on Main Street, still maintain that feel. So if we do believe in the plan and yet we see some problems, can we address these problems specifically for the needs of Civic or others, while still trying to maintain the spirit of the plan and the idea that we would like to have this area feel different? And if that means that it feels a little bit different, then maybe it means that even though we are going to be able to address the needs of Civic guests or Civic people that come in, what am I trying to say? Civic buildings, users, thank you. We should still address those needs, but we should also see if there's a way that we can help them follow the plan to address, sort of compromise to not just have a typical giant swath of everything that is just run through this, walk through this really quickly so you don't get hit by a fire truck, but also like allow the fire trucks the space that they need, but also maintain that feeling of walkability. I don't know, is there any way that we can kind of achieve that compromise where they can, have their needs addressed, but also we keep thinking about what we need?
Well, I think that's what their argument during the conceptual plan is going to be. I mean, if you go back to what I'm saying here is, let's go to the RBR and the portion, the 40% of the actual building. Portion may be up to 75%. Where does that 75 come from? Well, it's motivated by what their proposal is. So that's, yeah, you're right. That's swaying where the number is being driven to. But I don't go into say, and it can be all apparatus bay and a driveway for whatever anybody wants to do, or all the post office delivery trucks coming in. We go and shall not be used for public or employee parking area. So I'm even saying, looking at their site plan and saying, yes, I agree, the parking is behind the building, just like we want it.
Yeah.
And the public access is behind the building, just like we wanted. But it can be for courtyards, green spaces, and this is only Civic. And think about it at the time. We were anticipating, this is a small block area. We weren't thinking that a Civic use was going to be transferred at the time. They might have been thinking it, but at the time the ordinance was written, it wasn't. We thought this small little couple of block area is going to be mainly users of shopping, insurance, professionals, whatever else it might be, where people can walk up and down the street, or other approved design elements. So the other design element is it's not talking about the apparatus bay. But at the conceptual site plan, they're going to come in and say, I want to use 75%, and here's my proposal. And we're going to evaluate, well, is it a courtyard? Is it a green space? Or is it another approved design element that we're okay with? And they're proposing some of their alternatives in that conceptual site plan. Whether it meets muster for this change or not will still yet to be debated. But
Yeah.
you'll be looking at it as if you're seeing this site plan
Yeah,
amendment.
Becky, I feel like, as Corey expressed, he's fighting the fight that you're talking about. I think he's trying to make the changes while maintaining that feel.
Okay. Good.
Plus, I think, back to the plan of, walkability, maybe there's a chicken and an egg thing here about who's walking where. But maybe this is the type of development that you get groups to come down, they take a nice tour of the fire station, and then there's a desire to walk to, maybe there will be, I don't know, something to the south that's something to walk to. Go get an ice cream cone. I don't know, whatever. But this is a nice thing to draw people down to the area. Yeah, sure, it's not a main attraction, it's not a museum, but there is a reason to come down and see what's there and see what's going on, and this is a nice way to do that and make it look good. So.
And nothing beats a cool fire truck on its apron. That's an awesome view.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into the water, Kev.
Okay.
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to recommend approval of the following proposed text amendments for the SMSC overlay district. And I'm just going to list the ones as given to us in the staff report with suggested reasons for the actions A through G as found in the staff report.
A through, did you say G?
G as in George.
I second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further debate or discussion on the motion?
Corey, can you talk to us a little bit more about solid and void requirement that you have highlighted? You're still not comfortable with it?
That's probably the hardest place, not from looking at the fire department and trying to challenge them. It's the issue of, I agree that civic buildings will have a less window treatment to it. Where I become more uncomfortable is when there is a civic particularly use building, your architectural elements of the building replace that window treatment. So now you get the columns and the crown moldings and everything else that occur in a design project if you're really thinking a Capitol building. And if you look the solid devoid of the state capitol, you're not going to reach 60%. Because that thing is
lots of columns
and heavy, heavy elements, and you get that look. And I think that's the weakest point where I struggle is we're not yet strong enough in a civic design because we relied so heavily that this was going to be a window design. We haven't really replaced anything with that other, if it's not solid devoid, now what's in place. Now we've got it. You got to be substantially brick and all those other elements, but I just don't think we've addressed from an urban form the design elements that would be in lieu of a window design. That's the weakest point. But the reason I'm horse betting here is I'm not seeing a civic use in the next 5 years probably coming, and maybe I'm wrong.
Probably not.
So do you feel like there would be any other way to compromise on that beyond what?
Well, I think yes,
they've
the
asked?
fire department, 60 to 15% is significant. Find out from their driving, because the long discussion between us has been a friendly banter of who's going to push who where. I've been pushing to pull and drag as much out of their design as I can pull out. And that's the chief. We've been a year now. We last met, and I'm trying to pull out as much design elements out of them as I can, because that's what I try to do best. Okay, we're going to compromise, but we're going to get the best out of the compromise. Their issue is the operation of the doors, is what I was told. and why the 15% is so drastic. But that's probably my most uncomfortable place, is not on the fire department. If something else came in, boy, 60 to 15% is a significant change. And
Yeah.
who is replacing the stairs out front?
Fireworks.
You gonna go check it out? Yeah, you know, that 60 to 15%, again, for a civic type of a building, I mean, I understand the 60% to me sounds like, it sounds reasonable for a retail type of a front on a, you know, where you're walking down the street and you got the displays, window displays out front, and that makes a lot of sense. For the civic type of building where they're gonna be different, I don't know that you didn't necessarily want that much window or whatever on the front of a building like that. And, you know, for example, a school, well, okay, other than a newly built high school that looks like an airport terminal, do you want that much window up front? I don't think so.
Well, I feel like, well, don't you think though that the doors are like pretty much, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the doors are all window, right? Don't they like, the doors have huge windows?
In the, yeah,
Come up to the,
Yes, please, yes.
So there's, in the doors, there's two rows, two rows of windows. We can't make it all glass because of the weight and the speed that the doors have to come up and open.
okay.
We've created archways around every door opening to try to give it that old town fire look, which I think is really
Like
awesome.
you see out there.
Looks
yeah.
really great, right? So what we have are two rows of windows, and that's the standard. And typically what you get there is that's where we get a lot of pedestrian people looking in. And that's fine, because you know they're gonna, you know, they just want to see what's inside or show their kids the fire trucks. To make them all glass, it would be so heavy that the cost and the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance of those doors would be really cumbersome. We looked at a bifold door, and you can ask, that was my strong, like, I want those bifold doors, because that is old traditional fire. It's so cool looking, but they're $50,000 per door.
Yikes.
Compared to $7,000. So, I mean, I'm a steward of public, you know, we have to watch our public funds and all the funding behind that, and so that just doesn't, for me, financially make the right sense. But this is our standard door. You can go to any of our fire stations. It has the double rows of windows, and that's why we can't do an all glass door. It's so heavy.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I suppose stretched saran wrap is not an option.
Remember that public safety comment earlier? Yeah.
That would be, yeah, something else.
All right.
Most is on the table, right?
Yeah, it is. So I was just going to one last pass to see if anybody else has any more comments or thoughts or questions. Let's see. We are. Wait, whose turn is it to start? It's Commissioner Wright.
Aye.
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 All right. So the motion passes to recommend approval, right? Isn't that what we're doing on that one? Anyway. So let's move on now to the next item on our agenda, which, surprise, it's a public hearing. This is for the consider the proposed conceptual site plan for the South Davis Metro Fire Station at approximately 300 South Main Street. Staff.
All right, we're at the conceptual plan, and I'm not going to go through as much in detail and purposes of just time and allow you to have the discussion in the fire department, because I know their architect may have a few questions. So I'll jump to the recommendation. Provided that the amendments pass, I built the recommendation around that they would go through, or whatever the council amends them, if that takes place, then they could proceed if you agreed with the recommendation to a final site plan. If they didn't proceed, we would have to come back and have another discussion about what's going to happen with the design of the station. But in lieu of that, assuming that the council will pass or at least modify to some extent, I think they generally hit most of the concepts with the amendments. If you look at my red lines that show where they don't comply, a lot of this is verification on the landscaping plan and the number of trees, because we're at a conceptual level, and just reminding them of all of those, the dimensional tabulations of the civic use lot type to make sure that we meet all the RBR and everything requirements as amended, if amended. I think the two largest issues that I remember from the report that I wrote in there was one, that spacing on the south end with the 15-foot yard. They're trying to fill the gap with the front of the accessory building. I think that's some argument to be made. I think the issue of a plaza, if it's mended, some other design parameters, so the checkerboard pattern carrying through the landscaping, I think that does a nice public space pedestrian, through and carried into the landscaping, and has a cohesive design to it. But it is absent of some pedestrians, so in thinking of the Park City example, the concept is that there's an excess gap that could occur if the next development is demolished and put in place. And those are the small pocket little areas that you could provide some passive amenities to that in lieu of the large apparatus bay and the plaza. And that's why I kind of brought that up in the design guideline. The other one was surprising in the sense of I wasn't thinking at it in the discussions, is the parking. I think are required to calculate it at 34. They're providing 20. I don't know, remember any of the discussions, the rationale, or if we even knew those numbers at the time of our discussions. But I do mention that, if this is a fire station, has a specific use and need for parking, it's best in a civic type to get as much landscaping and plaza and other feel out of it than to stack a bunch of parking. So I'm weighing, do I push to get a bunch of asphalt and parking, or do I push to get more out of the green space plaza, concepts out of there? So I mentioned they could get a specific user if they met the criteria and really only needed the 20 stalls. The other minor one is this was my nightmare and confessional. I'm sitting in Missoula, Montana at about 3:30 in the morning, and had to call Cassie and say...
Not at 3:30, though.
No, not at 3:30. I had to text Cassie at 3:30. Emergency, zoning emergency. No, I called her in the afternoon the next day. Their building is 38 feet, which meets the civic lot type requirement from a building height standpoint. But I remember in our discussions that they want to put the grade up, and the apparatus bay is down a downslope concept. And if I remember right, it was 4 feet in the design plan. So if that 4 feet is raised up onto the site, that puts the building from top back of curb where the building height measurement is in that lot type, that puts it at 42 if the building grade is risen. So if there's a 4-foot difference, if the building's at 38 feet, that puts it at 42 from top back of curb. I don't know if I assume they got my report and can answer whether my recollection is correct into the report. So the building itself could meet, but the measurement's taken from top back of curb, not at the 6 feet of grade around the building. That's something I mentioned in the report. But other than that, I'm going to leave you to ask the questions or have the applicant raise their questions.
So Corey, is that height thing, is that measurement different than in other property types?
It is. And the Main Street is the only place that we go from top back of curb to roof peak or top of flat roof. It's the only place we do not average.
Yeah, that was my other question.
Yeah.
It's not an average.
It's not an average. That form base, and part of the discussion is a form base. Part of the discussion is the east versus west side heights that were amended later. The residents did not want the higher heights on the east side.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? All right, we're on a roll. All right, we'll invite the applicant to come up and speak and maybe address those things that Corey talked about.
Again, Jeff Bassett, Fire Chief for South Davis Metro Fire, and Bill Gould, who's been brought on as our architect firm for the construction and design process. Just in Corey's, the first thing about the parking stalls, we will probably seek that 34. I mean, to put 34 stalls would probably take the entire site. And that's, you know, half of our building is the apparatus bay, right, just to get enough of the trucks in there. So that's would be difficult to get the 34 in there. So in regards to the spread, that was a design feature that we put that accessory building on there to try to help with that if you wanted that design. That's the reason why that accessory building was there. We're trying to, kind of like what you discussed before, I don't want you to think that I'm coming in here asking for, I'm trying to work with everything that they're there. I'm really not trying to just not adhere to what you want. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm trying to work, and Corey and I have, I think, done a great job in trying to get this accomplished. But that's why people ask, that looks out of place. I've heard that a lot. That looks a little bit out of place. But that's what we're trying to achieve with that accessory building or the shed, is to try to help with that wall-to-wall spacing. And just on a side note, the only reason why we've done that setback, just to get that out there, is because we don't want the bays to be all the way up to Main Street, or else people won't be able to see us as the vehicles leave. I get a lot of complaints about the big tree at the existing fire station, that as the rigs come out, people can't see us because the tree blocks the fire trucks. That's a common complaint I get, is that we should trim that tree down or do something different with that tree, because it's, so we don't want to bring that building all the way to the front, because then as the vehicles get out, you know, I don't know, I'm not a speed expert, but people are doing like 50, you know, down Main Street, it seems like sometimes, and there's just not that time to see the truck come out. So that's why we've brought that back as much as we could. Do you want to cover the back to grade?
Yeah, I think the building was fine. I was just trying to say, since there's 15 feet of excess, whether the gap, because there'll be a building here and it potentially has a gap, and so could the front area here be incorporated
In plaza.
in a plaza with a short wall here or something, keeping people from walking through?
The property will have a really nice, what's the wording on the fence? It's not like a pillar with the slide-in cement decorative fencing. The precast fencing is what we will have down that south and then the east. And we can certainly close that in along Main Street, tie that into the corner of the fire station. If you know, to enclose that, if that makes it look aesthetically better.
Well, that would be hard for people to see. It would kind of defeat the whole purpose about.
I'm just talking about to the corner of that bay. If the concern is about, you know, if I'm looking at it, we could certainly bring that precast across the side yard to that corner. I'm just trying to think of ways to make it look, to help meet that requirement.
Is it okay if I ask a question about that storage building? We have a need, you know, for lawnmowers, snow blowers, things like that. And if we were putting it here, we'd normally put it in the back where everybody else would. But the concept of trying to go and fill that frontage and meet those requirements, we thought, okay, we've got a need, can we use it as an element? If Corey talked about, you know, getting the most out of these compromises, and we, you know, if the for pure function, we wouldn't have anything in front of those apparatus bay doors. So you could have a field of vision both ways, look up and down the street. So we still set the portions that we were trying to keep up front to give some continuity to that street. You know, the pedestrian street experience that's there. If that shed element doesn't accomplish that, it would probably serve us best to have it in the back. And I don't know if Corey's talking about if maybe we keyed and develop the plaza a little bit more on that south side.
corner.
You know, does it need the does it need that shed element
Yeah,
there?
if we don't need the shed, then we maybe incorporate that as a plaza feel. But again, I just get nervous about putting people in front of those things.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, I should have cut and pasted a visual of the little pocket area in Park City or something like that. I think the shed's fine, and if it's set back far enough to give you the visual triangle, I think that works. You know, it's not part of the main building. It's not contributing to the solid void issues. It's not contributing to the main building fabric and wall. You're filling it in with something to try to create that wall. And I don't want to diss that's a good attempt with it. I'm just saying that this is the, for lack of better terms, this is the pedestrian walkway with the form base or the urban appeal for people to follow through. I still think that, you know, there's lawn and there's grass here, and rather than come back in here and expand the building, I mean, the one option is a report is just make your building wider, which is you don't want to do because you need this for the detention. So the code requirement is only looking for 15 feet. You can have the other 15 feet. That's the expected space. This is the extra 15 feet. And I'm saying since this is the other approved design feature, we could make up its weakness by this area could be slightly plaza where a person can stop and hang
Can
here.
you just move the mouse? I can't
Oh,
see
sorry.
where you're-
Sorry, I had it earlier and then I stopped. I need a bigger colored mouse. But this area is lawn, and I think this could be that little pocket court that does have that passive place that person can stop as everybody goes out and have a conversation. Because we don't want them to have the conversation through the apparatus bay apron. That's designed, it looks nice, but it's intended to move you. The idea is there's going to be potentially another building in this form-based theory world that we're in the code world with. There's an extra 15 feet not being utilized, and I'm saying, okay, the courtyard's not a full courtyard with a tiered, and we could capitalize the other design element is allow the apparatus bay to go through with the decorative pedestrian path, and we could put something in addition to your shed that acts as a public space. Is the thought pattern. Whether that's a small benches or
Covered area or something?
Yeah, not a covered area because you get too high, that's the covering, but you could have a little garden court with a bench. You know, it'd be nice if the city well came off the wall of the shed there.
What if we just
and
put
people
a
could
flame-
feel.
Flame,
Yeah.
open flame. I mean, if you're looking for, you know, to put some benches and maybe fill that in with cement, I mean, we're not gonna take the sidewalk checkered, right? Because
No.
staff felt that needs to be straight away. So
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure commission understands that's not gonna be, it's gonna be a straight sidewalk and the checkered's gonna be more in the apparatus.
Yes, is more in the
And then,
apparatus.
I mean, I wanna try to accommodate as much as we can, so.
Is there a fire memorial art sculpture that could go there?
Yeah,
Water
we
wheel.
don't have enough money for that, but we
A
could.
water wheel, that'd be water, you know? Water, some sort of water feature could be cool.
We could probably put some benches or something there to incorporate something,
Is there a big sculpture axe?
something that would cause injury and generate business.
Is there a bucket brigade where you could just, the water tilts, the splash pad? I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing on that.
Well, we talk about ongoing maintenance.
Well, let's talk really quickly. Let's just think, okay, if I were a preschool group coming to see you,
Yeah.
I would enter through the main doors. I would go get a little tour.
Yep.
I would end at the fire trucks.
Yep. Outside, out front.
Out front.
Yeah.
And then would there be a little place that I could
Hand out some treats.
hand out some treats and say, oh, and now let's talk about this really cool thing that we just
I mean, traditionally, this is what happens: is they all hang out on the bumper of the fire engine.
Okay.
That is, with the exception of my Bountiful station. That's my only exception.
Because they go to the park afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a home run.
Yes.
People love it all
Yep.
day.
I know.
But with the exception of my Bountiful station, that's where everything happens. Is because they're going to park in the back. They're going to come to the front.
Because there's no place for them to go. But if we created a place for them to go,
If we want to get some rec money, some parks and rec money, and you know, but that's honestly what happens. Is when we're done, really what happens is they just sit on the bumpers of the fire trucks and chit chat with the fire guys. We kind of go through our little, this is what we do, that, you know, we explain turnouts. We want them to feel safe because when they see us in a fire, it's 100% different. That's the education component that we go through. And then they really, the bumpers are so big, they literally sit them on the bumpers, take pictures, and that's where they hang out. And then when they're done, they just get back in their cars and off they go.
Do we really want to encourage hanging out? I mean, let's say it was a preschool group. Do they stand around and talk?
Yeah,
Or do they run around?
that's really my thing. I mean, if we created that environment over there, just imagine if the fire truck left, kids naturally run towards us, which we absolutely don't like, because they want to see the apparatus, the lights and the sirens. That makes our drivers very nervous, because you don't know what a kid's going to dart out somewhere. I'm not.
Yeah, our view is not for the kids at the fire station tour. Our view is that the form-based code creates those interests all along the way. There is a gap here of 15 feet.
mm-hmm.
Is this sufficient to meet? Because the codes, if you look at their staff report, the code's very explicit. If there's more than 15 feet, you've got to provide some type of gathering place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm trying to resolve. Is
Since-
this sufficient?
Since we're brainstorming, the Landmarks Commission is trying to purchase a Dual Creek Historic District sign, and this has been a site of interest for them to place a sign. Maybe it's not a great idea there because people will look at it and stop. But I know that's been in the discussions before in this conceptual site plan, so I thought I'd just bring it up.
I'm only laughing because at the existing fire station, we have a historic monument that's been ran over 3 or 4 times that we keep having to replace.
Don't
That's
run
the
over
only reason
a
why
sign,
I'm not
yeah.
against what you're saying. I'm just, the car wrecks and people, you know, so that's all. But if, what, is it like they want a trail sign?
Similar to, a little bit taller than a trail sign, kind of like what you would see at like the Dual Creek Trailhead, but nicer looking, and just a map of the Dual Creek Historic District with our historic homes on it. Because this is a kind of a new site and it's right on the edge of that historic district.
So if we
It's
created
been
something totally
thought
further
about.
back, if we create something like at the corner or maybe a little bit back
Yeah.
away.
Could we scoot the shed back?
Yeah, the shed, my preference is in the back corner. We just
I
brought
mean,
it up, so we're really open to
We could
where-
still even have it towards the front, but just even back a little bit more.
Well, or say, let them put it in the back of
Yeah,
the
put
building
it in
and
the
then
back.
put,
Yeah.
And then put something else.
put
Yeah.
something else
Yeah.
up
So
there.
if we put it in the back corner, so it's not visible, and then we created maybe a landmark plaza,
Or a small
maybe.
dog park.
kind of, yeah.
Shaylin will be so glad that you said that. I hope she's listening right now.
Is that a small size or only a small dog park?
Misplaced modifier. Small dog park.
I mean, we could certainly, I mean,
It's just an idea.
it's a cool idea.
I think it's a cool
Probably
idea.
take that shed, put it in the back, create more of a a plaza, so to say, maybe on that corner or behind it just a little bit. Still give us the room for the detention and have an area where people can walk in, look at that, and then maybe walk back out. I don't know if there's a way to direct them with coloring of cement or something to that effect.
But just a one-way in and a one-way out, so they're not crossing over into the apparatus bay.
Yeah, so they're not walking in the back. Right?
Yeah.
One of my problems at the Bountiful Station is that we've had so many apartments built around us. We have kids thoroughfare now through the parking lots, and that's created a real interesting dynamic for us, is that we now get people crossing through the back of the parking lot where the fire trucks are coming into the back of the building. So
I like that idea.
Well, and if it's something that the city and the Landmarks Commission are interested in partnering with, it doesn't all have to be built at once. It can be just set up to accommodate it.
If we could figure out a way to design that and put a little monument up there and show some history of Centerville, I think it's a great idea. And then we can take that shed element, just tuck it in the back, because, I mean, it's really, mowers, that's what you're gonna see in and out of there all the time, and we could hide that or not have it visible from the main street and maybe create a more plaza environment on that corner.
So we can't get our fire bells, we can ring it.
Yeah,
I still like the idea of a water feature, some sort of water feature. I mean, fire and water, that's like perfect.
If you could make it out of solid gold, that'd be really nice.
You know, it's funny, I had a solid gold statement today in our construction meeting. And that got thrown out by my contractor really quick.
Nice. Okay.
That answer your question?
I think we would love to do that. I think
cool.
that would be
cool.
a lot better than just having the corner shed stick up there.
Yeah.
We could do a joint thing if whoever the sign, whatever.
The Landmarks
I
Commission.
don't know, is there a sign law or a sign rule for Main Street? You know what I mean? You'd have to.
There is some sign rule.
But a sign for advertising, this would be the public art
this
feature.
Is not, this is different.
So
Public art feature.
But if you had a bell at the bottom, then the people could ring it at the end. That'd be cool.
We could do that. You know what would happen?
Everyone walking by for junior
You know what
high,
happened?
they'd hang.
Turn off the bell. Kids or, you know, that's
right.
True.
that's what will happen.
I don't know, maybe not your bell.
Yeah. Long story, early in my career, this is way off sidebar. The Bountiful Fire Station, we had an outside bell. It's over 100 years old. I've restored it.
Wow.
And it's back at Bountiful Station. That bell used to sit outside and the kids would come up. I mean, this isn't a bell, it's a massive bell, and kids would ring that all day. And eventually, it was full of duct tape, so it made no noise.
That's funny. Okay, so I think that's a good idea. I think that's some good conversation there. Anything else that we need to talk about along those lines?
Is the building height, did you look at that? Did I catch that wrong?
Oh, right, the building height. Let's talk about that.
I think we can work within the building height. Corey modified that text amendment different than we proposed it, and I think he did a good job. We had put 4 feet higher than the top back of curb, where the ordinance was 1 foot. And I think you really amended it to consider that plaza steps up, and then we're within 12 inches of where that plaza hits the building, right?
Right.
Which was our intent. The 4 feet is plus or minus. It gave us a little wiggle room. It's probably more like 3, and we can lower the building a foot. I think we can, if 40 feet's the standard, I think we can make it work. We can make that work.
And the zoning text amendments we recommended are recommendations to the city council. They could still consider changes to those and additions. So when this moves up to city council, you know, if you couldn't make it work, you could go and say, this needs to be 4 feet higher or something.
Okay.
No, that's a different change though, right?
2 different sections.
2 different sections. Well, okay. Well, either way, it sounds like you think there's a way to make it work, and that this isn't going to blow up the whole thing.
Right.
Okay. Great. Anything else that we missed on that? I think that's it, right? Great. Anything else you'd like to, we'll get there, just a second. Anything else you'd like to address? Great. Good. Thank you. Okay.
Sidewalk. Is that still gonna be the game plan?
No, they amended that
They amended that?
probably nearly 2 years ago.
Did they? Okay. So we're not worried about the fire station, fire trucks coming out and being in the way, the building being in the way of them seeing them.
Right. They're,
Yeah, so how far do they want them set back? Do they?
the ordinance requirement, I think it was 15 to 20 feet. I think you're at the 20 feet, 20-foot setback. 20 to 25. Yeah, 20 to 25. And then the apparatus bay will be back 40 feet.
Okay.
So there'll be a significant apron for the trucks to pull out of the station, park on the apron, either maintenance-wise or stop before they enter traffic and go on a call.
So the corridor thing that's kind of obsolete, or is that still?
It's been modified several times.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And tonight has modified a different parameter with the
Quite a
bay,
bit,
but
yeah.
yeah, it's been modified.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else from the public who would like to speak? Any other public comments we have? Seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public hearing. Any other responses or questions for the applicant or staff, or any other discussion? No. Okay, then I think that a motion would be in order. Is it getting late?
No, I got it. I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to accept the conceptual site plan for the SDMFD Fire Station to be located at 300 South Main Street with the directives in the staff report 1 through 6 and the suggested reasons for the action A through C.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry, real quickly, probably should have mentioned this before. Condition number 5, well, directive, I guess these are directives, right? Directive 5C, that says fontange.
Instead of frontage?
Frontage.
I
Make
thought
sure
they were
that's-
referring to fontage.
Yeah, you know.
This was the Latin word
Yeah, I was gonna say.
root for frontage.
It's the new word.
And then 5F, address the missing the window design, so cut out that second the, I think.
I'll accept those friendly amendments.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion or debate on the motion?
No, from me.
Great, then a vote on the motion. We'll start with Commissioner Hinsey.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you. And we appreciate all the discussion and the comments, and we just appreciate the patience. So. Okay, we're going to continue on with our agenda then. We'll go to the City Council report, Community Development Director's report.
There are a couple items on the city council. The fence passed as originally drafted.
What was it originally, 8 foot?
So it's 8 foot between differing zones, missing the buffer element, and between an AL and an RL zone. So it passed. The Bell property rezone also went through. So that's there's two of them. There's the one with the multifamily. This was the one with the back lot to add to commercial. That passed.
Brighton, I thought we'd get Brighton back at this meeting, or were they shooting for the next one?
Well, we delayed them to the next one in preparation for what was happening tonight and where they were at for their submittal. We met with them this morning for their resubmittal. We went over that. So they're scheduled for your August 8th, right? Is that the right date?
Yep. We'll
And
be
Cassie?
discussing the Sheffield Downs tabled conceptual and Main Street table of uses. And that's it.
Nice. Excited for that. Okay. All right, then the last item on the agenda is a review of the minutes. So we'll go through these as usual and call out any changes and start with page 1. Does anybody have any comments about page 1? Page 2. Page 3.
I have just a little change, and these are just nuances to understand the intent of what I'm saying. So line 8, it says Commissioner Wright asked if the applicant would be able to come up with a different plan that takes advantage of the density bonus. That sounds like I'm asking them to come up with a different plan that comes with a density bonus, and I didn't want that. I was making sure that they wouldn't be able to come up with a different plan. That was my question, is
Yes.
I was asking, now if we say this, would they be able to come up with a different plan? So I might have said come up with a different plan, but my intent was not to come across that I wanted them to. So I would like it to change to say Commissioner Wright asked if the applicant would be able to change their plan to take advantage of the density bonus if the current application is approved. I feel like that's
Will be allowed.
would be allowed to change. There you go. Would be allowed to change the plan. I just wanted I wanted the idea to make sure that I'm not suggesting that they come up with a density bonus plan change. I just wanted to ensure that. So.
And Corey, that doesn't obviously change your response then?
No. Yeah, it's the issue of can they propose something and then come back in under the rezone and do something different?
Yeah, maybe say that. Commissioner Wright asked if the applicant would be able to propose one thing and then the change that we just added. Be able to propose one thing and then come up with.
One development style and that's not too
yeah.
much. One development proposal and then be able to alter it to a
Yeah.
different development proposal.
Something along those lines that it just makes it so that it's
Make it sound
clear.
really good.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm suggesting that.
Okay. Sounds good. You didn't want to go a switcheroo?
I don't want to switcheroo. No switcheroos.
Okay. Anything else on page 3? Okay. Page 4?
Again, this is just for context. I'm excited about what Brighton Homes has started, and she would love to see a more comprehensive storyboard. So instead of "and she would love," maybe I could say "but she would love to see."
But. Okay. Anything else on page 4? Page 5? So anyone else is page 5?
Oh, I had one more thing on 4, sorry.
Oh, okay, go back
Sorry,
to 4.
sorry. So I also thought that on 43, she said she likes that proposed development provides smaller lots. That, again, I may have said it like exactly like that, but the intent of what I was trying to say is so that addresses the concerns of those empty nesters in the previous sentence. So Commissioner Wright stated she believes it is important to recognize the need for housing for empty nesters wanting to stay in Centerville who want smaller lots and less yard care. She likes that this proposed development addresses that need instead of provide smaller lots.
Geez, Becky, it's like someone's trying to do a smear campaign on you.
I just wanted to make, this is a kind of a tricky issue, and so I want to make sure that I may have said it in a way that it could have been confusing, and I just want to make sure my intent is correct. So.
Okay. Anything else on page 4? No. Page 5? Maybe.
I'd like to say I have one there, but.
Well, I was going to say maybe we just, yeah. Maybe just figure out what happened on page 5 and close the gap. I don't know. Anyway, page 6. Anything on page 6? Nope. Page 7. Page 8. Similar to page 5. Don't know what happened there. But. Page 9. All right. motion?
Come on, Kai, you can make the motion.
You've been kind of quiet today.
Are you kidding? I ask questions. I move that, what am I moving for? That we close the meeting?
Easy, Turbo. We move
that
to.
we accept the minutes as stated with the amendments.
Second.
There we go. We have a motion to accept the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Now, Kai.
Oh, now I move that we close the meeting.
All right.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.